Chapter 61. Star, Overwhelmingness, 4, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Shin Jiam-gyu gritted his teeth as he thought, where on earth did she disappear to? It had already been 4 days since his twin sister disappeared into thin air. While his team was crossing the forest, a group of monsters had ambushed them. Under the guidance of his team leader, Kim Hyung-jun, the team had successfully gotten the monsters under control to an extent. The problem came afterward, because Shin-Eun-seo had disappeared while they were killing monsters. At first, Jiam-gyu assumed that she had hidden from the monsters or fallen behind the group as she chased after the escaping monsters. After a while, however, he became nervous, thinking that perhaps a monster he failed to notice had kidnapped his sister. However, no matter how much he scoured the area with his teammates and how many monster hives they raided, Jiam-gyu could not find Eun-seo. If he had found her corpse, he would have been sad, but he could have at least given up. Nevertheless, he had been unable to find a single trace of her, as if she had evaporated into thin air. Jiam-gyu even asked the instructors, who had said they would protect the trainees in secret, what had happened, but the answer he received was that they had not seen what happened because of the hectic situation, leaving him incredibly frustrated. Every day from then on was torture for Jiam-gyu. Sometimes he felt so suffocated that he was unable to breathe, leading him to run into the forest alone and scream at the top of his lungs. However, he could not calm down. Although he had always teased his sister for her immaturity and nagged her about wasting her time and money, she was still his dearest sister. Although she acted as if she had a screw loose, she was very considerate of others. In contrast to Jiam-gyu, who always gave up even if he wanted something, she was so tenacious that she got things done every time. In fact, she was very mature, almost as if she were his older sister. He still had a lot to learn from her. Eun-seo had been like that ever since she was little. In the past, Jiam-gyu had once returned home after being beaten by the neighborhood bullies because of his impoverished single-parent family. Upon seeing him in such a state, she had fiercely asked who was responsible, then gone out with a slipper. After a while, she returned with a bruised eye, looking incredibly strong as she brightly said she had slapped the bad guys' foreheads using her slipper. After their mother found out about the incident, she had scolded Eun-seo for being too wild, but Eun-seo had just beamed, saying she was all right. Jiam-gyu could not lose his dear sister like this. Thus, he had left his team members, who had grown reluctant to find her, 2 days prior. However, why did I run into them here? Jiam-gyu thought in frustration. He ran into trouble because he was stopped by Lim Ju-han and his boys, who had formed the biggest group in the Blackish Blood mountain range, named Mr. Lim. Please. Let me enter. I beg you, Jiam-gyu pleaded with a bow. The people who had stopped him were perplexed, but they shook their heads as if they had no other choice. I'm sorry. We also know why you're doing this, but, they trailed off as they busily tiptoed around Ju-han, who was crossing his arms and watching them. It was enough for Jiam-gyu to figure out who was trying to interrupt his search, so he looked at Ju-han with a pleading gaze. However, Ju-han calmly shook his head with the gentle smile he had used to bewitch several other people, saying, I'm sorry, but I can't let you do that, because it's dangerous here. We'll look for your sister as much as possible, so please go back. Although he spoke very politely, he was firmly declining Jiam-gyu's request to enter the area. In truth, Ju-han was secretly very annoyed, despite his calm expression. He thought, what's this idiot? I already have tons of things to do, but he's bothering me. Ju-han had ordered his team members to block the route because it led players to an area with monsters that could give a substantial amount of experience points. As he was aiming to be on top among the trainees, be on top of the dungeon ranking, he did not want other teams to use the hunting ground he had secured with great difficulty. Lee Chang-sun, Lee Chang-sun. I have to beat him somehow. Ju-han thought, gritting his teeth. The last time he had checked, Chang-sun was in second place on the dungeon ranking, not just the trainee ranking. Considering how the training exercise had just started 3 weeks ago, Chang Sun's current ranking was absurd. In contrast to Chang Sun, Ju Han was currently in 121st place. On top of that, there was also a man named Baek Jio. Who was at 42nd place in the dungeon ranking. Although Ju Han was confident that he could climb the ranks within the remaining period, he could not tolerate someone's name being above his. I have to close the gap as quickly as possible because it'll be harder to do so as time passes. Ju Han thought anxiously. That was why he had secured an efficient hunting ground and focused on leveling up after instructing his team members to stop anyone from approaching. However, he had suddenly been stopped by his team members' urgent report. His sister went missing nearby. Nonsense. He should have come up with a better excuse. Who would believe that? TSK. He had already concluded that Gyu was lying. However, even if Gyu was speaking the truth, Ju Han had no intention of granting his request, because the world of players was very cruel. If a monster got the better of Gyu in the training institute, a place safely guarded by instructors, he would soon die in a foreign dungeon if he ever went out into the field. That kind of guy is always a problem. Without knowing the reality of player life, they flock toward the job like moths. No, idiots, just because players look cool. Holding his desire to show his disgust, Ju Han smiled gently again. No matter how much of an idiot someone else was, it was important to always maintain one's image as a kind-hearted person. I'll search the area for just a minute, so. Gyu desperately shouted. I'm sorry, Ju Han said as he turned back to return to his hunting ground, thinking Gyu had to have understood by now. Pa. Ha, ho. Wait. Ju Han's team members shouted as Gyu ran in the direction of the hunting ground with gritted teeth, avoiding the people trying to stop him. Clash. Step back, Ju Han said, instinctively drawing his sword to stop Gyu once again. But. Gyu stuttered as he came to a halt, as Ju Han's bloody sword would slice through his waist if he continued to force his way in. Doviko, it's against the rules to trespass in a hunting ground that has an owner, Ju Han said, reminding him of the training institute's rule. According to the principle of survival of the fittest, trainees could form a team or monopolize a hunting ground. However, they would only be able to do so if they were skilled enough, meaning other people could also take one from them. To sum things up, Gyu had to choose one of two options to pass through the area. He had to win against Ju Han or become his subordinate. Unlike Seo, Gyu was not a talented player, so he had no way of winning against Ju Han. Still, he could not retreat. Thus, he ended up hesitating, unsure what to do. With a solemn look, Ju Han brought his sharp sword closer to Gyu's neck, threatening to take his head off at any minute with just a little more force. The aura of Tiger Kill fills the air. As he continued to ramp up the intimidation, Ju Han gave the trembling Gyu a final warning. No, he was about to. As he began, I said, step back. Get away from my younger brother, you half-chewed squid. However, Ju Han was interrupted by Seo's yelling. ***** shouting at the top of her lungs, Seo abruptly sprang forward. It seemed that the person being intimidated was her twin, younger brother, whom Seo had been looking for. However, as the person doing the intimidating seemed strong, Jio prepared to follow Seo. Wait, Chang Sun suddenly said, holding out a hand to stop Jio. What's wrong, sir? Jio asked in confusion. Stay put for a moment, Chang Sun instructed him. Jio looked at Chang Sun with confusion for a moment, wondering why he had given such an order. However, when he noticed that Chang Sun's gaze was fixed on Seo, he took a step backward without challenging the order, because he believed Chang Sun had to have a legitimate reason. Ever since Jio had undone the half-spirit curse, he trusted Chang Sun more than anyone else in the world. If I observe her, I'll be able to find out what a Gildal is and check if she suffers from other side effects. Chang Sun thought as he silently watched Un Seo. Boom! Leaping high into the air, Un Seo accurately landed between Jiam, Gyu and Ju Han, kicking up a large cloud of dust. At that moment, Ju Han subconsciously moved back a bit. On top of being surprised by Un Seo's sudden interference, she was also emanating shockingly intense energy. The aura of Tiger Kill is raging. Behind Un Seo, Jiam Gyu was also surprised and dumbfounded, barely managing to utter, "You." For a moment, he had been relieved to find his twin sister, whom he had tried so hard to search for. However, it seemed as if she had become a totally different person. However, Chang Sun thought Un Seo was bound to be different. Her Tiger Kill had been infused with a substantial amount of the Hoenn Mama after partially undergoing guildalization, which meant it was a lot more advanced than that of the other trainees who had recently learned Tiger Kill. Thus, unless the person's mastery of the skill was higher than Un Seo's own, they would naturally feel overwhelmed by her. That was not what surprised Chang Sun the most, however. She might be surprised at the changes in her body, but she's handling the change quite well, as if she had been born this way. Chang Sun observed. Judging from the way she was acting, Un Seo herself seemed to be shocked by the sudden changes in her body. It was understandable, as her stats had completely changed after being rescued from the monster who had kidnapped her. However, she did not reveal how baffled she was. Perhaps it was because now was not the time to do so, or it was simply because she was far tougher than her petite frame suggested. Rather, her eyes shone brightly with apparent satisfaction at her newfound power. "How dare you lay hands on my younger brother? Get lost!" Un Seo shouted with fierce energy. Ju Han's expression froze. Only after his subordinates pointed their weapons at Un Seo did he come back to reality, his face red with embarrassment. He gripped his sword tightly as he bit his lower lip, asking, "What did you say?" "I said, you look like a piece of half-chewed squid. Do you have a problem with that?" "Oh, I see what the problem is. You look like a dried-up sea anemone, so I can't compare you to an innocent squid." "Ah, wait, then am I being unfair to the sea anemone?" Un Seo remarked with a smirk. For his entire life, Ju Han had walked an elite path and was always considered handsome, so he had never heard such an insult. On top of that, Un Seo's smirk only made him angrier. However, he suppressed his anger as best he could and calmly said, "You're insulting me and my team." "How is it an insult?" "Well, you're the one who tried to lay a hand on my younger brother, and what's that? Blackmailing. Threatening. Playing gab. What's your favorite?" Un Seo continued. Feeling as if he would go out of his mind if he continued to bicker with the petite woman before him, Ju Han's expression stiffened once again before he said, "I guess I have to shut your mouth first." "Pa." Ju Han moved quickly, planning to subdue Un Seo first. As the instructors were no doubt watching, he could not truly harm her, but the instructors would not interfere unless the fight became too serious. Thus, he could still teach her just how scary the world was. Ju Han's team members, who had been staying still, also moved. As his subordinates, they had to help him. "You cowards. Well, I guess I should have seen it coming, seeing as 3 men are ganging up on 1 woman, huh?" Un Seo remarked, insulting them as much as she could while coldly analyzing the situation. She was going up against a total of 3 players, including Ju Han. He already looked like a skilled player who would not be easy to deal with, but there were 2 more players aside from him. If she fought them head-to-head, she would definitely lose. Even though she had acquired a mysterious power, she could not guarantee that she would be able to use it unless she completely mastered it. However, she would be able to win if she used that power correctly. Thus, she took a weapon out of a deep corner of her inventory and slammed it against the ground. A tower shield. Chang Sun thought in surprise. Un Seo had pulled out something he had never expected, a 2-meter tall tower shield that was far larger than her entire body. The shield was so thick that most attacks would fail to even leave a scratch on it. Clang. Clash. What's going on? Why did it? Just as expected, the two players who tried to attack Un Seo first were perplexed when their attacks were easily blocked by her tower shield. Paying little heed to them, Un Seo moved forward, focusing her power on holding the tower shield in her left hand. When she moved forward with the tower shield, she looked like an armored car, severely intimidating her opponents. Your tiger walk is strengthening as you walk forward. You are moving more quickly. The skill shield attack is being used with full force. Boom. Boom. Arg. Ugh. Un Seo charged forward so quickly that the two players were instantly struck by her tower shield. One player flew into the air like a deflated balloon, eventually rolling across the ground. Barely managing to sidestep the charge, the other player dodged Un Seo's shield attack, and attempted to attack her from the side, but he was stopped. Clang. Halberd. The second player's eyes widened when he saw what had stopped his sword attack. It was a long halberd, a weapon with a sharp spike attached to a large axe blade for a head. Just like the tower shield, the halberd was so large that it seemed as if it could cut monsters in half from top to bottom with a single strike. The contrast between the petite woman who was barely 160 centimeters tall and the vicious-looking polearm only made the sight look more intimidating. A tiger disaster is being used with full force. The player had no idea where his opponent's power was coming from. Un Seo powerfully swung the halberd in her right hand. Crack, boom. Slide. She destroyed the player's sword instantly, and also hit him as hard as she could. At the last moment, she had used the back of the halberd, keeping the player from dying. However, he was tossed a great distance away, struck by an immense force akin to being hit by a car. Un Seo's outrageous power overwhelmed everything. The aura of Tiger Kill has filled the air. Having missed the chance to attack Un Seo, Ju Han stood still, frozen in place. Gyu gaped, vacantly watching Un Seo in disbelief over what was happening. What were you going to do with me again? Un Seo casually threw Ju Han a question. Ju Han subconsciously straightened his posture, as a shiver and a trickle of cold sweat ran down his spine. Looking at Ju Han, Un Seo laughed slyly as she continued, my memory often fails me, so can you tell me again, you spoon-worm-looking mister? The celestial, Twilight. Piercing Owl, cheers the player Shin Un Seo Han for executing justice. 1. The raw literally says, Mr. Lim. The intent is to convey how arrogant he is. 2. Age is very important in Korea. The older you are, the more mature and skilled you are assumed to be, so people like to say, I'm older than you. As Un Seo and Gyu are twins, they always argue about who was born first. 3. Koreans often make fun of other people's looks using sea creatures. The most commonly used one is squid. Chapter 62. Star, Overwhelmingness, 5, you are listening at novelfull.audio. I see she doesn't need my help, Baek Jio.O remarked, awkwardly putting away the long spear that he had been holding so he could help Shin Un Seo at any moment. Indeed, Un Seo was teaching Lim Ju Han a lesson. No matter how much Ju Han attempted to counterattack, every swing of his sword was blocked by Un Seo's tower shield. Afterward, Un Seo skillfully began to retaliate, swinging her halberd with admirable skill. In other words, she was a tank-type player who could both inflict a great deal of damage and withstand her enemy's attacks for a long time. In the end, Ju Han tried to escape, unable to withstand Un Seo's attacks. However, his attempts soon became futile, as Un Seo knocked him out by throwing her halberd at his back. Un Seo and Ju Han both looked powerful, no, Ju Huan was technically stronger, but he was forced to his knees, unable to inflict significant damage on Un Seo. The gap in their innate talent is greater than I thought, Chang Sun thought, summarizing the reason very concisely. It was true that Ju Huan was more skilled than most people, but Un Seo had so much more talent that she could easily overwhelm him. She was what people called a genius. There was a reason why Chang Sun had taken an interest in her as soon as he met her. Although her talent had not been noticed until now, she would definitely have found great success someday. If Chang Sun had not been in the White Tiger clan, she might have become one of the rising stars within the clan. No, she had almost become a guildal precisely because the clan already thought so. And her talent became even greater after going through guildalization. Chang Sun thought. Un.Seo's greatest talent was her unwavering judgment in unexpected situations, such as the times when she had doubted Chang Sun, encountered Ju Huan, and realized her mysterious power. Without revealing her uncertainty, she had rationally analyzed the situations and made decisions accordingly. Above all, she trusted her own decisions and remained determined to carry out her plans. Due to her frivolous behavior, few people expected that side of her. On top of that, she had obtained outrageous strength after guildalization. Potentially, she could also have gained sharp senses, giving wings to someone who was already talented. Unlocking talent. No, guildalization is more about unlocking potential, completing the subject's body. If she's already that skilled even though she didn't go through half the guildalization process, I have to assume that a real guildal would be even more outstanding. Chang Sun speculated. The ghost soldiers alone were incredible, but a guildal would be at a much higher level than them. However, Executive Director O was the only one who had control over them. Silently clicking his tongue, Chang Sun thought, I don't know what he's aiming for, but Executive Director O is certainly ambitious. It looked as if the key would be to find out how many cards, such as the ghost soldiers and the guildal, were up Executive Director O's sleeves. I'll have to inspect what I obtained from the altar in detail. Recalling the scroll he had found with Un Seo, Chang Sun organized his thoughts and moved in Un Seo and GM.Gyu's direction, with Jio.O at his back. What happened to you? GM.Gyu asked, looking at Un Seo with confusion. However, he still checked to see if his sister had sustained any injuries. It was understandable, as she had become a totally different person after disappearing into thin air for 15 days. When he sensed the approaching Chang Sun and Jio.O, he flinched as he looked at them, staying on guard. As he had suffered because of Ju Huan, he wanted to verify their intentions. Chang Sun in particular was someone to watch out for as far as the trainees were concerned, but it's okay. They saved me, Un Seo reassured him. That bast, no, Mr. Li Chang Sun did. GM.Gyu asked in surprise. Although he knew little about Chang Sun because he was uninterested in games, he had heard a thing or two that told him what kind of person Chang Sun was. On top of that, the Chang Sun whom GM.Gyu had initially met seemed to be an arrogant man who thought he was better than everyone else. However, it appeared GM.Gyu's first impression was wrong. But who's next to him? I've never met him, but he doesn't look like an instructor. Is he one of the trainees? GM.Gyu wondered, not recognizing Jio.O's changed appearance. It seemed as if he would have to ask them countless questions. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, what are you going to do, sir? Jio.O asked Chang Sun, trying to get an idea of their next move after GM.Gyu received a brief explanation of what had happened. Jio.O felt that Chang Sun would naturally have a plan in mind. Un Seo and GM.Gyu likewise fixed their gazes on Chang Sunday. Un Seo thought the mysterious power she had suddenly been granted was a bonus reward from Hyoju or an unknown deity, granted while she was unconscious. Although it only happened on rare occasions, players sometimes gained sudden strength through the bonus rewards they received. The celestial Calamity Tiger delightedly says that he likes the Claw who is as talented as she is, laughing. The celestial, Twilight, piercing owl, says that the power may have originated from an evil source, but she can put it to good use. However, GM, Gyu and Un Co had nowhere to return to because of Un.Co's newfound power. Even if they returned to their original team, the other team members would have an awkward relationship with them, so the two had to follow Chang Sun. Fortunately, Chang Sun had not explicitly rejected them, implicitly agreeing to work together as a team. Thus, they were bound to be curious about Chang Sun's plans. There could be nothing more exciting than watching the genius who had set a new record in action. With sparkling eyes, Un Co especially looked forward to Chang Sun's answer. However, what am I going to do? Chang Sun replied nonchalantly, as if Jiao.ul had asked a redundant question. Isn't it obvious, seeing as we're in a dungeon? Then are you planning to clear the dungeon? Jiao.ul asked, his expression brightening. In contrast to Gyu, who screamed silently as if he could not believe what he was hearing, Un.Co's eyes sparkled as brightly as a galaxy. The Black Blood Mountain Range had existed for a very long time, but it had not been cleared even once. The dungeon itself was very large, and the difficulty level varied in every sector, making it difficult to clear. There was a reason why the White Tiger clan had given up on clearing the dungeon and instead used it as their training institute. However, the clan instructors always played things up, urging new trainees to clear the dungeon if they could, because they thought it would be impossible for the trainees to clear the dungeon within 100 days. Thus, it was understandable that Gyu could not believe they would be trying to finish the dungeon. Regardless, the plan had been formulated by Chang Sun, the genius SSS+++ grade novice who had achieved many unbelievable goals. The celestial, Calamity Tiger wonders if it is possible to do that. As he had been watching the Black Blood Mountain Range for a long time, even Hyoju could not believe Chang Sun's big talk. The celestial, a good season to hunt, cheers you on, saying you will be able to accomplish it. The celestial, world, encircling serpent asks how anyone can still doubt such a sly snake, clicking his tongue. Paying little heed to how the deities were reacting, Chang Sun nodded quietly as he looked at Jiao.ul. I knew it. Then how long do you think it'll take to clear the dungeon? Jiao.ul asked with sparkling eyes. Meanwhile, Un Co and Gyu showed completely different reactions from one another. As Jiao.ul's half-spirit curse was completely cured, all his attention was focused on challenging the unfinished dungeon that was considered impossible to clear. As he was a martial artist, he was bound to be excited about the challenge. What are you talking about? Chang Sun asked, tilting his head. Well, we have to make several preparations to clear the dungeon. Jiao.ul excitedly continued. We don't need to make preparations, Chang Sun said, snorting lightly and crossing his arms. A day will be enough. This time, Jiao.ul and Un Co silently screamed along with Gyu. ******, ugh. Ju Han opened his eyes, clutching his aching head. Had he fainted? Everything around him was confusing. However, he abruptly came back to reality as all the humiliating events that had happened to him flashed before his eyes like afterimages. He had been beaten by Un Co like a dog. No matter how hard he resisted, Un Co had followed him relentlessly and beat him with her halberd. Even right now, he felt as if Un Co would smack his head again with the halberd. Ju Han instinctively raised his sword high into the air. Whoosh! However, nothing smacked his head. The only thing he could feel was a breeze. Ju Han gradually looked around at his surroundings and realized what was going on, as Un Co and Gyu were nowhere to be found and the only people he could see were his team members, who had fainted before him. How dare! How dare she! Ju Han thought as he gritted his teeth angrily, unable to hold in his boiling anger. He trembled with a sense of humiliation he had never felt before in his entire life. What did she do? How can a bitch whose rank is much lower than mine? Ju. Han thought, but suddenly, a possibility came to his mind. Yes, she must have cheated by drinking a potion, fooled my eyes, or something like that. That must be it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. She might be a demonic being. He could not be more wrong, but he had a hard time accepting the fact that Co had beaten him, as he was confident he could even beat Chang's son in his current state. I'll get to the bottom of the cheat she used. If she's truly a demonic being, I'll never let her walk in daylight again. Han thought as he gritted his teeth. Team leader. Where are you, team leader? Coming from the hunting ground, his team members who had been hunting together looked for him. They had likely begun to search for him because he had not returned for a long time. How could Han explain the situation? Although he wanted to say everything was fine, his surroundings did not look fine. No matter how Co had cheated, it would be embarrassing if his team members found out she had beaten him. Maybe I'll silence them for good so they won't talk about what happened. Han briefly thought about killing his two unconscious team members, but he could not due to the instructors watching him. Or maybe I'll tell them she ambushed us, but my team and I ambushed her in turn. Han quickly analyzed the situation and concluded that ambushing Co was a good idea. Everyone in the dungeon was supposed to believe he was invincible, and thus could not lose unless he had been ambushed by a demonic being. However, he could still look invincible if he caught the demonic being in the end. No, more than that, he would leave a strong impression on his team members and fellow trainees while turning the table on the enemy. A trainee who caught the demonic being that infiltrated the training institute in a life-and-death battle would definitely become a headline in the media. Han had already concluded that Co and Gyu were demonic beings, and thus fixated on the plan of receiving the spotlight by subduing them. Yes, that Li Chang's son bastard must also be a demonic being, or else it would be impossible to have such a record. After I tell the world what that Co bitch is, I'll be going after you, Li Chang's son. Han thought, finalizing his plans. He slowly stood up, acting as if he had received a grave injury. In truth, however, he was meticulously, picturing his shining future. I'm here. Juan shouted. However, that shining future would dim soon after. The dungeon mission has concluded. Compiling the final ranking. Dungeon ranking, first place. Li Chang's son, 810,320 points, second place. Munxiang, 390,000 points. Different rewards will be given out based on performance. Different rewards will be given out based on rank. Ha! Han murmured, dumbfounded, after seeing a message he had never expected to see in the Black Blood Mountain range. Han, his team members who had been running in his direction after hearing his voice, the nearby instructors, the people who had been training in the safe zone. All the people in the dungeon were screaming. What in the world happened? The dungeon has been cleared. Unbelievable, what the hell happened? Who was monitoring Li Chang? Sunday. Quickly find out what happened. However, they had to accept what had happened, because they could not continue to stay in the dungeon if the dungeon mission had concluded. The dungeon is closing. Everyone, please brace for impact. 10, 9. 1. The dungeon is now completely closed. Great work, everyone. It had been 20.5 days since the probationary training had begun, and the dungeon had been closed in less than a month. The celestial Calamity Tiger enjoys the chaos. Chapter 63. The meeting, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What? Why people suddenly? The guard post that had been protecting the gate leading to the Black Blood Mountain range was in chaos. The guards had already been in disorder due to Director Guan and the inspection department members barging in. On top of that, the probationers and instructors had all been forced out of the dungeon due to the gate closing. Among the crowds, there were also inspection department members who were there to investigate the blown-up lab. Everyone looked perplexed. Nobody had expected that the dungeon mission would be concluded. Some were so confused that they thought they must have been forced to exit the dungeon to carry out a new dungeon mission, but those with sharper judgment realized the true reason. It was due to the person that had ranked first in the dungeon ranking, with an overwhelmingly higher score than the White Tiger clan leader. The person whom people couldn't easily refer to by name. Li Chang, son. Someone get Li Chang, son. Come on. Someone shouted at the top of their lungs. Asterisk 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 who baby pot. Man, my Hyung.nim has done it again. It's fucking great, sick, 5, 6, 7, awesome, and cool. Hey, mister. How old are you, beep? Turn right to find the Senior Citizen Center. Unknown. What's this? Are my eyes malfunctioning or something? Gaudium. The Black Blood Mountain Range is the White Tiger Clan's training institute, right? The cursed place where 10 probationers go in and only 8 come out. Gosh, my Hyung.nim is definitely on another level. That I heard the dungeon is really famous among foreign players too. The difficulty level differs by sector, and the dungeon is so freakishly large that they almost starved to death before completing the dungeon mission. That he even beat Sword Sky Tiger and ranked first place in the dungeon ranking. How did he clear a dungeon like that? Steak. I once saw a video clip that showed the inside of the dungeon, and it was freaking crazy. He cleared that dungeon in less than a month. How could you fall for that, you idiot? It's obvious the White Tiger clan and the tyrant planned it all from the start. Our resident conspiracist appears again. That I'm not sure why they continue to live. Lololol. Do you have any idea how valuable the Black Blood Mountain Range is? Lololol. So you're telling me the White Tiger clan threw it all away to make one rookie into a hero? Well, I guess the White Tiger clan is so filthy rich that they have money to burn. Steak. The tyrant fans are going crazy nowadays, so they'll definitely go berserk again. Things will get hectic if they go crazy. They'll fight like hell again. Kyong. I think the White Tiger clan are probably the most bewildered ones in this situation. Are they not releasing an article or something? Renin. LMAO. They're panicking. They must be, since the estate they've been using for over 20 years disappeared overnight. Press X to express joy. Applaud tyrant. All the people that yapped about how they can't believe what happened will finally shut up. Ha 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 ha, the comments section is gonna clear up. As the internet went berserk over the news articles and comments related to Chang, Sun, the White Tiger clan were also in a state of mayhem. The inspection of the secret Tiger Lab had intensified the battle of nerves between Executive Director O and Director Guan, so the clan members were already on thin ice. The sudden news about the cleared dungeon was like a bucket of hot water poured all over it. Executive Director O's faction and Director Guan's faction were having problems of their own, but it was the personnel section that had the biggest trouble to deal with. Only a fourth of the training period had passed, so according to the curriculum, there were many probationers that hadn't gotten through the basic training. However, the training institute had disappeared overnight, and they had nowhere else to train. The personnel section members had to quickly send cars to pick them up. Afterward, they summoned Chang, Sun to the head office to figure out what exactly had happened. However, when the personnel section chief asked Chang, Sun about how he had cleared the dungeon, Chang.Sun's answer was very simple. I just did it. His answer was so blunt that the personnel section chief and the executives, who had been watching Chang, Sun, were rendered speechless. Chang, Sun spoke like the artist from that old educational video clip who would say, "It's easy, right?" They could not even think of what other questions to ask. Meanwhile, Baek Jio.O, Shin-eun, Seo, and Shin Jiam-gyu just watched quietly. Due to his unfortunate childhood, Jio.O wasn't one to be fazed easily, and he looked on with a calm expression. Seo and Jiam-gyu, who had led more normal lives, fidgeted nervously. What am I supposed to do here? Do something. Seo mouthed at Jiam-gyu. What am I supposed to do? All I did was follow him around. Gyu responded indignantly. Co's eyes shone. You always say you're my older brother, so act like one. You only treat me like your older brother in times like this. Gyu gritted his teeth. Although they silently argued, in the end, they couldn't come up with a solution. Just like Gyu had said, the Shin siblings hadn't done much. After teaching Ju Han a lesson, Sun had proclaimed that he would clear the dungeon within a day. The Shin siblings had obviously thought that he was bluffing. Co knew how confident Sun had become during his professional gamer year, so she had just thought that was how he was expressing it. Gyu had worried, thinking that Sun had become overconfident after his string of successes. However, they had just followed him since they had no other choice. It was dope. Gyu thought. It was the only word he could come up with to describe what he had seen. Sun had been a sight to behold in the dungeon. The way he relentlessly ran forward and swung his sword, sending dead monsters flying through the air like fallen leaves. When he used the whip in his right hand, the sound of explosions filled the air like a thunderstorm. The ground shook every time he thrust the spear in his left hand. Jio had been there to occasionally take care of the monsters that Sun had missed, so the Shin siblings had been left with nothing to do but follow Sun around. When they returned to reality, the group had already gone to the next mountain, diligently carrying out the dungeon mission. After half a day, they saw the message that the dungeon mission had been concluded. Therefore, even if the personnel section chief looked at them, silently urging them to explain further on Sun's behalf, the Shin siblings didn't have much information to offer. Thud. In the end, one of the executives slammed the desk hard in frustration. It was the Human Resources Department head, a ranker. Are you kidding me? He shouted. Since the personnel section was under the jurisdiction of Human Resources, the personnel section chief's face turned pale as he watched his superior shout. It seemed like he was threatening Sun's group, even though they hadn't summoned him here to intimidate him. The problem was that Sun was not the kind of person that could be intimidated like this. He looked at the department head nonchalantly, but everyone could see that he was starting to feel annoyed. The tension in the air caused everyone to fall silent, except the department head, who continued to shout with a reddened face. Why were you looking at me like that? Are you going to rebel? Ugh. Smack. The department head suddenly stopped when someone smacked him in the back of his head. How dare you yell in here? Do you want to die? Said the man that had smacked him. He had a husky voice and spoke like a thug. All the people inside hurriedly stood up to greet the man formally. The tiger kill is raging. Their faces turned pale as the husky-voiced man's tiger kill continuously suffocated them. How could he use tiger kill this heavily in such a narrow space? There was absolutely no reason to do that, unless he actually intended to suffocate them. Team 2 leader. After belatedly realizing who had smacked him, the Human Resources Department head frowned and glared angrily. He felt humiliated to be smacked like a kid in a room full of his subordinates. However, Co Jong-gwon just smirked, as if challenging the department head to do something about it. Team leader, huh? Wow, you're talking awfully casually today. How come? Are you planning on going toe-to-toe with me? Well, I'm actually glad to hear that. What are you doing here? Sir. The department head could do nothing but hold back his anger. Although a department head seemed to be a higher rank than a team leader, he couldn't walk all over Jong-gwon since the clan's corps were actually the attack team department, which operated in the public, and the future strategy department that worked in the shadows. Above all, as the attack team 2 leader, Jong-gwon was the right-hand man of executive director Oh, who was the most influential person within the clan. Jong-gwon's level was also much higher than the Human Resource Department heads, so there was a high possibility that squabbling with Jong-gwon would only lead to more humiliation. Zhang Guan smirked even harder at the dispirited department head, then gestured at Chang Sun with his chin. I'm here to take him. We aren't done investigating. The department head started. Investigation my ass. You were interrogating him. Anyhow, I'm taking him, do you have a problem with that? Zhang Guan stepped forward menacingly, bringing himself face to face with the department head. Although the department head still looked upset, he had to take a step backward. Even the personnel section chief had been quietly urging him to back down. Technically, the human resources department members weren't in a position to question Chang Sun's group, since they were the ones that had confidently urged the probationers to clear the dungeon if they could. If Chang Sun had simply said, I did what you asked me to do, they would have had no response. However, they could not have possibly expected that someone would really close the Black Blood Mountain Range. As a result, now that he was in charge of settling the damages that had occurred after the dungeon closed, the annoyed department head was just meaninglessly releasing his frustrations on Chang Sun's group. Besides, Executive Director O had likely instructed Zhang Guan to personally bring Chang Sun's group. All the clan members already knew about how Chang Sun had decided to side with Executive Director O, so the department head had to let them go. I'll take that as a no. Everyone, follow me. Zhang Guan gestured at Chang Sun's group. The people between Zhang Guan and Chang Sun made a path for them, pressing themselves up against the walls. As if it was only natural to do so, Chang Sun passed by the personnel section chief and the human resource department head without saying goodbye, making the department head frown again. Still, no one could stop Zhang Guan and Chang Sun's group. Jiao.O instantly followed Chang Sun out, while Un Co and Jiam tentatively began walking before scurrying out behind them. You three follow my team members for a moment. Li Chang Sun, you follow me. Zhang Guan instructed. At that moment, Un.Co's and Jiam.Gu's eyes lost focus because they weren't sure what to do. Jiao.O's eyes were fixed on Chang Sunday. It was only after Chang Sun nodded at them reassuringly that they followed the attack team 2 members' lead. They must be the team members that you took under your wing in the training institute, huh? Zhang Guan asked. As Zhang Guan moved forward, Chang Sun walked beside him. They were in a random hallway of the building, all alone, as if Zhang Guan had intentionally emptied it out beforehand. Chang Sun wondered for a moment about how to answer. Then, he nodded. It seemed strange to say no at this point. That's pretty much what happened. Yeah, that's how you start. A team is first formed by a freaking smart leader gathering up like-minded people. Zhang Guan looked at Chang Sun with interest. Although he had wanted to have Chang Sun as his team member for a while, and he had no problem with revealing his desires, he didn't outright ask Chang Sun to join his team. This was partially due to the promise he had made to Executive Director O, his cousin. Plus, there was another plan he had on his mind. Even if Zhang Guan acted cool, Chang Sun couldn't care less. He didn't want to bother paying attention to Zhang Guan's every action. Therefore, Chang Sun just randomly chatted with Zhang Guan for a bit, quietly wondering where he was being taken, expecting that it was Executive Director O that had called for him. However, he suddenly noticed something. Executive Director O's office isn't in this direction. He turned to Zhang Guan and asked, where are we going? Ah, did I not tell you? The corners of Zhang Guan's lips curled upwards. We're going to the clan leader's office. He wants to meet you himself after hearing your story. Chang Sun's eyes shone for a moment when he heard that Munxiang, the Sword Sky Tiger and the clan leader, had summoned him. 1. The raw was. The word is slang and means it's great. 6. And 7. Are puns because in sounds like 5. Old Koreans often make this kind of joke. 2. The author is referring to Bob Ross. Chapter 64. The meeting, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Welcome. A short, middle-aged man stood in front of the clan leader's office, which was located at the innermost corner of the head office. Although he looked a little bit nervous, he had his hands behind his back and smiled gently when he saw Chang Sun walking in his direction with Seo Jong Gwon. You look well. Your time in the training institute must have changed you a lot. Executive Director Oh said amicably, like a gentle neighbor. The skilled, fierce tiger eyes has been activated, observing you. However, Chang Sun knew Executive Director Oh was watching him as sharply as ever. He must have many questions. The dungeon closed soon after the research lab blew up, so he'll be really curious if I know anything about the explosion. Chang Sun assumed. Executive Director Oh had wanted Director Gwon to be inside the lab during the explosion, but he mistimed it, failing to kill Gwon. Given his personality, he likely wanted to know exactly what had happened, but he couldn't because the dungeon had disappeared before he could investigate. It was natural to think Chang Sun may know something, but Song Yu Jun must have told him that I don't know anything, and Executive Director Oh won't think that I was able to clear the dungeon within a day. Would one have been able to clear the dungeon while investigating the research lab normally? That would be impossible, so even though Executive Director Oh might have doubted Chang Sun, in the end he had no choice but to believe him. Executive Director Oh was the one who instructed me to clear the dungeon in the first place. The least Oh could have done was dig into Baek Jio. And the Shin siblings, but they actually didn't know much either. It'll be okay. They aren't the kind of people who would say something about me. Jio. Already thought of Chang Sun as his savior, and the Jio. That Chang Sun knew would be willing to swear a life-long loyalty to him, not betray him. Chang Sun wasn't worried about the Shin siblings either. Shin Un Seo may have acted silly, but she knew there were lines that she should not cross. Shin Jiam Gyu was born calm and careful, so he wouldn't easily be swayed either. Executive Director Oh had no choice but to observe Chang Sun, who seemed to have changed a lot over the past month. Nevertheless, Chang Sun was certain that Oh would not be able to find anything out about him. Although Oh was sharper than most people, he wasn't sharp enough to accurately analyze Chang Sun, someone who had experienced the myth war. I appreciate that you think so highly of me. It's all thanks to you, Executive Director Oh. Chang Sun bowed slightly, as if he hadn't noticed how sharply Executive Director Oh was watching him. Shortly after, Executive Director Oh stopped observing and gently shook his head. Haha. I haven't done anything, this was all you. Anyhow, you've put the clan in chaos. Is that so? Chang Sun replied calmly. Are you seriously asking that? You look like you're pretending you don't know anything, even though you do. It's not just ordinary chaos either. All the attack team leaders are yelling at the top of their lungs to have you as their team member, Executive Director Oh continued as he snuck a glare at Jong Gwon, who pretended he didn't notice anything and turned his head sideways. And the clan members are busy talking about what to do about the rewards that you must have received after clearing the dungeon. Anyhow, it seems other clans abroad have also heard the news, because they have been busy calling the executives non-stop. Executive Director Oh proudly smiled and squinted at Chang Sunday. So, you haven't changed your mind, right? He was instructing Chang Sun to not change his mind about joining the future strategy department, burning with the desire to have Chang Sun as his own man. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, says that he does not know his place, lightly snorting. Pablesag seemed to dislike Executive Director Oh's attitude, but Chang Sun calmly nodded, reassuring him. Actually, I'm the one that still wants to make such a request. As I told you before, I'm thinking about resigning if I don't get to join my preferred department. Chang Sun said as he pulled out a smartphone from his inner pocket. When he turned it on, it rang over and over again with notifications. The screen showed over 100 missed calls. He was telling Executive Director Oh to think about what he meant. That seemed to finally relax Executive Director O, because he burst into laughter. Sure, a man should have a big gut. The clan has no intention of letting you go, including me. See, the clan leader himself wants to meet you, and he has never done that before. The leader of the White Tiger clan, the Sword Sky Tiger, was known to be uninterested in what was going on in his clan and the world. However, judging by his interest in Chang Sun, it seemed the Sword Sky Tiger had heard much about him. In reality, Chang Sun couldn't help but keep watching the door to the clan leader's office. The air felt too heavy, as if a large beast was sleeping inside of the office. Chang Sun felt like the beast would immediately pounce at him if he opened the door. I heard Hyoju has a really fine apostle, and I guess it was true. The skill the Viper Eyes has been activated, sharply analyzing the situation. The skill Beast Senses has been activated, detecting danger. For the first time after his regression, Chang Sun felt like he was encountering a dangerous man. When he was a novice, he hadn't thought a ranker could be dangerous, but he felt a little different now. He might be more talented and skilled than his guardian. Chang Sun nodded, recalling the Sword Sky Tiger's secret history involving the Black Mountain King. Although Executive Director O was simply visiting his master who he had served for a long time, he also looked quite nervous. He turned to the office door and said, "Shall we go in?" The secretary standing in front of the door quietly opened it and stepped aside. Whoosh! At that moment, the intense energy that Chang Sun had felt beyond the door released into the hallway, sending out a strong wind that tousled Chang Sun's hair. The tiger kill is raging. The tiger kill, that was incomparably stronger than that of Chang Sun and the others spread outwards, but that wasn't what caught Chang Sun's attention. The inside of the clan leader's office was nothing like he had expected. "Oh, I forgot to tell you that the clan leader's office is a dungeon. He summoned the wizards a while ago and moved the gate here." Executive Director O grinned. They had only walked through a door, but Chang Sun felt like he was now in a totally different world. He felt like he was in the fantasy novel, in which the protagonist enters another world through a wardrobe. "You have entered the dungeon once, Green Flower Garden. As Chang Sun followed Executive Director O inside, he saw a message telling him that he had entered a dungeon. As the name suggested, the inside was full of brilliant flowers. It seemed the Sword Sky Tiger himself had tended to them. There was a hill covered with red roses, and wildflowers like dandelions danced along with the wind. Tulips, daffodils, forget-me nots. Chang Sun could even see camellias. Under the warm and peaceful sunlight, all these flowers that were supposed to bloom in different seasons flaunted their beautiful colors and fragrance, very different from the intense tiger kill that had raged near the gate. That was why Chang Sun felt like this place was too artificial, as if the Sword Sky Tiger had decorated the garden this way to hide something. He normally would have felt peaceful in a place like this, but Chang Sun felt strangely nervous. His instincts told him that something was wrong with this place. The celestial Calamity Tiger watches the humans that enter his land. It was definitely Hyoju's land. Chang Sun thought. A deity's land referred to an area that was a level lower than a deity's sanctuary, so Chang Sun thought Hyoju's energy was what made the place feel ominous. He figured that Sword Sky Tiger must not be an ordinary man, judging from how he spent most of his time in a place like this. "As you commanded, I've brought Li Chang Sun, sir," said Executive Director O. Munseong. The Sword Sky Tiger, the owner of this space, wasn't far from the garden's entrance. He was wearing a traditional white hanbok, one that might be seen in a history book, not a modern hanbok. It had no pattern, making it appear elegant, as if he was standing on a quiet snowfield. His white hair, white eyebrows, and white beard matched his hanbok well, reminding Chang Sun of Taoist sages. Still, he had an unapproachable air around him. There was an old tiger whose fur was all white, and the Sword Sky Tiger was like a human form of such a tiger. His clan's name, White Tiger, couldn't suit him more, but White Tiger. No way, he's not even a fierce tiger. He's a jackal. Chang Sun lightly snorted after noticing Munxiang's true nature. Jackals were known for their viciousness and violent tendencies, and Munxiang was precisely this person. Although he looked elegant, he was greedy and violent. Judging by how the Sword Sky Tiger looked at Chang Sun, he could tell the Sword Sky Tiger always got what he wanted using any means necessary. Well, I guess he would do that, based on how ambitious he seemed in Hunyu's will. Chang Sun assumed. Executive Director O had said the Sword Sky Tiger recently had no interest in worldly matters, but Chang Sun assumed that the truth was different. Although the Sword Sky Tiger rarely took matters into his own hands, Chang Sun figured that he must have planted his men everywhere, because people like the Sword Sky Tiger never let go of what they had. He was only resting for a moment to obtain a bigger prize, and that was why Executive Director O was acting so nervous. Well, I guess that's why he's uselessly creating the ghost soldiers and the Gildao. Sword Sky Tiger was a beast that was always hungry. Yeah, I thought it was strange when he suddenly requested to see me. He wouldn't have reacted this fast if that story about him was true. The Celestial Calamity Tiger is watching you very closely. Hyoju had chosen the Sword Sky Tiger, so Chang Sun decided to consider Munxiang and Hyoju as one and the same. In some ways though, Chang Sun thought Munxiang might be harder to deal with because he looked sly and distrustful. So why did he personally summon me? Chang Sun wondered. The Sword Sky Tiger wouldn't have summoned him just to praise him. People like the Sword Sky Tiger tended to be rather elitist, with a tendency to disregard the inferior people. Then what was it? On guard. Chang Sun's eyes became cold. He's on guard against me. Chang Sun concluded that the Sword Sky Tiger must have known that Hyoju recently had all his attention trained on Chang Sun as his apostle. Munxiang himself had reached his current position by betraying his senior brother and teacher, after all. He likely feared that someone else could steal Hyoju's attention, and even his position, just as he had done. Meanwhile, Hyoju sat back and watched in enjoyment, showing how sadistic he truly was. Thud. Just then, Chang Sun heard the gate that led to the outside being closed. There was no way to go outside now. Chang Sun suddenly felt like he had been caught in a trap. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, frowns due to the unpleasant air in the dungeon. The Celestial, Twilight, piercing owl, warns you to be careful because something feels off. This was Hyoju's land and Munxiang's front yard, so Chang Sun knew he could die if he rubbed Munxiang's fur the wrong way. You're the tyrant kid that our guardian has recently shown interest in. Munxiang said, looking at Chang Sunday. Although his eyes looked nonchalant and vacant, he somehow resembled Hyoju. Chapter 65. Star, The Meeting, 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. What should I do? Chang Sun wondered for a moment. He had actually considered the possibility of being threatened like this someday, since he was planning to hog Celestial's attention as much as possible. He also thought some deities might even try to pull a trick to get him, so their original followers were bound to stay vigilant against him. I've already experienced this a lot. Chang Sun calmly thought. He had met such followers and deities in Arcadia many times, so this was nothing new to him. The Tiger Kill intensely threatens you. The skill, Beast Senses, has been activated, assessing the situation to be very dangerous. I'm Li Chang. Sunday. Chang Sun introduced himself. Using Tiger Kill, Munxiang intimidated Chang Sun, as if he would kill Chang Sun any minute. Through Beast Senses, Chang Sun saw how dangerous the situation was and realized that he had to get out of here. Plus, Munxiang was black when Chang Sun looked at him with viper eyes, so he knew he could not spend a second more in this place. Despite everything, Chang Sun calmly greeted him as if he didn't care, and didn't break his gaze from Munxiang's two shining eyes for a moment. You don't seem nervous around me. Munseong said, surprised. Chang Sun shrugged. It's interesting to meet one of the 9 swordsmen. Interesting. Munseong repeated. Yes, until a few months ago, I never thought I'd visit here. Chang Sun said. He wasn't lying, since he had been in the underworld until a few months ago, but Munseong didn't know that. Therefore he would understand Chang Sun differently, as an alcoholic that had spent his days drinking until a few months ago, who had never thought he would become this famous. If Munseong understood Chang Sun this way, that would mean he was convinced of 2 things. That Chang Sun had become famous overnight, and that a man of Munseong's position didn't need to remain vigilant against such a rookie. Both would hurt Munseong's pride. Chang Sun planned to proceed depending on Munseong's reaction. If Munseong lowered his guard, he would just retreat. If Munseong took action, he was going to counterattack right away. Of course, he couldn't beat Munseong since his level wasn't even in the 40s. Munseong's was over 90, the highest among the known high rankers. But I'm not alone. Chang Sun thought. Pabelsag, who was obsessed with Chang Sun, Jade-Rumungandr, Mephistopheles, Minerva, the Celestials that silently watched him even though they didn't send any messages. There were many Celestials that were interested in Chang Sunday. For those Celestials, they had even made a manual. If Chang Sun was killed, or if Hyoju claimed Chang Sun all for himself, it would definitely make the other Celestials react negatively. Due to the casualty, they may not have been able to influence this world directly, but they had a way to indirectly interfere to a similar level if they put their minds to it. To sum up, Chang Sun thought of the Celestials watching him as his backup. Even without backup, I'm sure I can escape somehow. Although he was stuck in Hyoju's land, it didn't mean he had no way of escaping. Ordinary players would never be able to think of a way out, but Chang Sun was certain that he could come up with something. He hadn't earned his divine name Divine Twilight in a poker game, so it didn't matter if Munseong himself chased after Chang Sunday. It wouldn't be difficult to shake him, unless Chang Sun was forced to battle him head to head. Of course, the White Tiger clan members would still chase after him to silence him for good, but he could think about how he would react later. What's his plan? Chang Sun thought about what to do next while also sharply observing Munseong to see his reaction. The celestial, Calamity Tiger, slyly smiles, wondering how you will react. He still couldn't tell what Hyoju was thinking, but... I see. Munseong nodded and turned in the opposite direction. I've heard that our guardian has promised you a gift, so I shall entrust the matter to Shi Huan. Pick it up on the way out. The exit has opened. What? Chang Sun thought. Holding his hands behind his back, Munseong went deeper into the flower garden, as if he had lost interest now that their business was complete. A new portal opened up in the spot where Munseong had stood, signaling Chang Sun to leave. Chang Sun was dumbfounded. Munseong wasn't staying on guard, ostracizing Chang Sun, or even looking at him. He didn't care who Chang Sun was. Since his guardian had taken an interest and decided to present a gift to Chang Sun, Munseong figured he should at least meet Chang Sun once, as Hyoju's apostle. That was when Chang Sun realized he had judged the situation wrong. Munseong isn't staying on guard because he's sure he won't be abandoned by Hyoju. He believes their link isn't weak enough to be affected by me. Chang Sun analyzed. The link wouldn't be something metaphorical like trust or faith, he thought. It should have been mutually beneficial, and thus would have a definite form. Their link is 7 cryptical books of San. Chang Sun realized. Based on the star object that the White Tiger clan coincidentally acquired, the clan had grown rapidly in the past decade. A celestial's power came from faith, so Chang Sun concluded that Hyoju must have become stronger. In other words, Hyoju wouldn't easily give up Munseong, who had provided him with such great power, even if he wanted Chang Sunday. Then what could Hyoju give to Munseong? It seemed Hyoju wouldn't just bestow blessings or authority, because Munseong would never be satisfied. There was only one, simple possibility. 7 cryptical books of San, again. In return for Munseong increasing the number of followers by resting the ghost soldiers and the Gildao, Hyoju could interpret the divine scroll. That meant Viper Eyes. Chang Sun activated the skill as he infused a profound amount of magic into his eyes. The celestial world encircling serpent supports you after reading your mind, as your plan seems interesting. Skill level increased. Printing information about the player Munseong. Chang.Sun's magic mixed with the Ian fire was so efficient that he could dig into the black-colored Munseong to find out more information about him using Viper Eyes. The black turned even darker, and Chang-Sun felt like he could see vicious fangs beyond the blackness. He is swarming with the very thick Hoenn Mama. He has more Hoenn Mama than the Gildao. Chang-Sun noticed. At that moment, Munseong stopped in the middle of the flower garden, and Chang-Sun could no longer see the blackness in him. After it cleared up, Chang-Sun could see Munseong looking at him with a more nonchalant gaze. "I hope you'll stop peeking," Munseong said. "I'm sorry." Chang-Sun slightly bowed. He thought he shouldn't provoke Munseong without a good reason. Munseong began to go on his way like nothing had happened, but Chang.Sun's head was more fogged up than ever. The Gildao wasn't the endgame. There's at least 2 more steps left, but he only revealed the ghost soldiers to his subordinates. Chang-Sun thought, still in shock. It seemed Munseong had already decrypted 7 cryptical books of San, to some level, but he had hidden it from others and ordered his subordinates to only manufacture the ghost soldiers for one reason. He wants to have all the power to himself. If Chang.Sun's guess was right, then he could see why Munseong had insisted on staying in the dungeon instead of focusing on running the clan. He was busy cultivating his own power. Hyoju had divulged the secrets of 7 cryptical books of San to Munseong, and Munseong had increased the number of Hyoju's followers like a crocodile and a crocodile bird. There was no clear-cut symbiotic relationship. "Hyoju just wanted to see my reaction," so Munseong chimed in. That was why Chang-Sun had to see Munseong in a different light. It looked like Hyoju had acquired a sword that he didn't deserve, and that sword was very sharp. Munseong has something bigger in mind, but what could it be? Chang-Sun wondered. ******, you have exited the dungeon. Clan leader is a difficult person to deal with. Executive Director O shook his head as they exited the dungeon. However, Chang-Sun didn't miss the faint traces of fear, greed and jealousy in Executive Director O's eyes. He has no idea what Munseong is holding inside his body. Chang-Sun thought as he clicked his tongue in his mind. Executive Director O must think that he had an ace in the hole named Gildao, but in reality, even the Gildao was meaningless compared to Munseong. Maybe he already knew what Executive Director O was up to behind his back, too. Well, Executive Director O isn't a person who would go down easily either. Whatever happened in the future, Munseong acting like butter wouldn't melt in his mouth or Executive Director O preparing to stab Munseong in the back. Chang-Sun could just silently watch from the side and fish in the troubled water by interfering when he needed to. Chang-Sun nodded in agreement. Yes, he looked like a person from a different world. He certainly acts like one. I still have trouble figuring out what's going on in his mind. Executive Director O replied. Trembling, Seo Jong-Gwon, who had been waiting outside, shook his head. I'm begging you, please do not take me to the clan leader's office with you anymore. Gosh. I can't stop shaking every time I visit the office. Jong-Gwon always ran amok as if he was scared of nothing in this world, but even he feared Munseong. Anyhow, what's this gift you're going to give me? Chang-Sun said, changing the subject. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, pompously claims that nothing will be a better gift than her bonus reward. The Celestial, Twilight, piercing owl, pays close attention. Oh, the gift. Pressing the elevator button, Executive Director O unfolded two of his fingers. The Guardian has given you two choices. Chang-sun looked at Executive Director O curiously. T.2, wow. Can you give one of them to me? Zhong-guan exclaimed, continuing to make a fuss. Glaring at him, Executive Director O continued, one is access to the armory, and another is access to the library. You can access up to the Tier 2 facilities for both. Tier 2. Zhong-guan loudly yelled in shock, not noticing Executive Director O's death glare. Even the executives needed permission to access the library and the armory beyond Tier 2. Although it was only one level higher than Tier 3 facilities, there was a big difference. They didn't have a reputation as treasure houses for no reason. As the White Tiger clan had spread across the world, they had gathered up and saved all kinds of skill books and artifacts in the Tier 2 facilities. They also held treasures that the clan members had made using the best of their abilities. Since the Fierce Tiger Library wasn't Zhong-guan's favorite place, he rarely visited it, but the armory was a totally different story. Thanks to Executive Director O, Zhong-guan had visited the Tier 3 armory, but he had never seen Tier 2. Now, such a privilege had been granted to a new employee, so how could Zhong-guan not be surprised? Yet, Chang-sun, the one actually making the choice, was calm, making Executive Director O curl up one corner of his mouth. You saw it coming, didn't you? Ding! The elevator arrived before them and opened its doors wide. Entering the elevator, Executive Director O pressed the button for the 8th floor, and Zhong-guan pressed the button for the 6th floor, where the attack department was located. All the while, they both fixed their eyes on Chang-sun. No, I'm surprised to hear this. Chang-sun shook his head. You're lying through your teeth. Who would believe you when you're so calm? Executive Director O lightly scolded, but he was laughing. Considering how I've finished the quest given by the Calamity Tiger and cleared the dungeon, I just thought he wanted to give me a big present. Chang-sun explained. Well, in that case, I understand. Executive Director O nodded and looked up at Chang-sun, who was much taller than him. So, have you made your decision? Chang-sun nodded. It had been obvious from the start. He already had Tiamat's Snaggletooth and Yuchang's sword as his weapons, and Choi Bu-yong could build him defensive equipment. On the other hand, Chang-sun had to find Descent Walk, left by the Sagittarius in the library, so he could benefit more from the Tier 2 library. I want to look for more skills, and I heard there are many new katanas, Chang-sun began. I knew you'd say that. Executive Director O nodded with a satisfied look on his face. Cling. After rummaging through his inner pocket, Executive Director O brought out a bundle of keys. Zhong-guan looked at them with shining eyes, as those keys led to the White Tiger clan's most valuable facilities. Executive Director O was about to throw an unusually short key to Chang-sun, but he suddenly came to halt. His eyes were focused on something else, as if he was looking at a system message. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes wide and curled up one corner of his lips again. Come to think of it, I heard you haven't chosen your guardian yet, am I right? Chapter 66. The Meeting, 4, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Come on, Hyung.nim. You're talking crazy. How could a player that has no guardian become this strong? Seo Zhong-guan snorted, crossing his arms. His reaction was understandable. Unlike small clans that worked like religious groups, the members of the major or supranational clans such as the White Tiger clan couldn't have the same guardian. The White Tiger clan was especially more tolerant about its players having different guardians, so the clan worked more like a mercenary group. Of course, to become executives they had to change their guardian to Hyoju, but the ordinary White Tiger clan members were rarely forced to do so. That was why the public and the media had two main questions when Chang Sun had first shown up. How did such a genius appear out of thin air, and which guardian had he chosen? Because he hadn't shown any signature skills, some conjectured that Chang Sun did not have a guardian, or that his guardian wasn't famous. However, just like Zhang Guan's reaction, they were instantly disregarded because they didn't make sense. Even the public knew that there was a limit to how strong players could become without guardians. On top of that, so many Celestials wanted to have Chang Sun that they wouldn't leave him alone. Among the experts, the fact that Chang Sun had finished the tutorial was no longer a secret, thus they could only assume that Chang Sun had a guardian. However, Chang Sun and Executive Director O just looked at each other without saying anything. Standing in between them, Zhang Guan felt anxious, beginning to think that the impossible might be true. He turned to Chang Sun and said, "Say something." Hyung.Nim, no, Executive Director O is making a wrong assumption. Chang Sun stayed silent. Why aren't you saying anything? Zhang Guan asked again. No way. It's not true, right? Of course, it's not true. Of course. Zhang Guan shook his head. Is that it true? Zhang Guan took a step backward, but he was stopped by the elevator wall. Impose.s.s.ible. Zhang Guan stuttered. Although he looked too intimidating to ever be shocked, he gaped so hard when he became certain. His jaw would have been dislocated if he wasn't a player. Without a guardian, Chang Sun had shown remarkable ability and cleared the blackish, red mountain range within a month, the dungeon that even the White Tiger clan leader had given up clearing in his youth. In this case, Zhang Guan couldn't help but wonder how much greater Chang Sun's abilities would be if he had a guardian. It's Kraz. Zhang Guan was so dumbfounded that he couldn't even think in complete sentences, but he could now see why Executive Director O had reacted like that. If Chang Sun truly had no guardian, what kind of power would he have if he chose Calamity Tiger as his guardian in the future? What position would Calamity Tiger offer to Chang Sunday? Just thinking about the answer made Zhang Guan tremble. The title of genius was attractive if the person was just normally smart, but an extraordinarily talented genius like this made people feel like they were meeting an alien. It seems that Calamity Tiger wants me. Chang Sun nodded. Of course. Even I, his mere servant, want you. Which deity wouldn't? Executive Director O shrugged. With his guess confirmed to be true, Zhang Guan could only silently stand still. Many deities have offered me the seat of an apostle. Would you be able to offer me something as valuable as that? Chang Sun asked. Since Hyoju's apostle was Munxiang, Chang Sun's question was ridiculous from the start. Implicitly, he wanted to know whether or not he could be ranked as a high priest or a bishop. However, it was also absurd because the White Tiger clan's high priests or bishops were the executives of the White Tiger clan, just like Executive Director O and Director Guan. The clan would be thrown into mayhem if a rookie like Chang Sun was treated the same as the executives. Even if Hyoju allowed him to become one of them, they would put restrictions on Chang Sun on their end. There were clans where every player was considered to be of equal rank aside from the clan leaders, but the White Tiger clan had a strict hierarchy. Executive Director O smiled enigmatically. You know very well that you're making an absurd request, right? That's why I'm telling you, if the condition to receive the reward is to choose a guardian, I'll just resign. There are many benefits to not having a guardian. Chang Sun said, firmly drawing the line. I see I have a new boss. Executive Director O said with a crooked smile on his face. The celestial, Calamity Tiger, hideously frowns and urges you to become his follower. The celestial, a good season to hunt, angrily asks the Calamity Tiger why he keeps coveting her apostle candidate. The celestial, Twilight, piercing owl glares at the calamity tiger. Thud. The narrow interior of the elevator was filled with Executive Director O's intense, tiger kill. He was intentionally intimidating Chang Sun, but it didn't work one bit. Due to the pressure, the elevator shook fiercely, as if it was going to drop any second. The celestial, calamity tiger, takes a step backward and smacks his lips. Executive Director O couldn't threaten Chang Sun for a long time because Hyoju had stopped intimidating Chang Sun, unable to ignore Pabelsag and Minerva's strong opposition. Smiling bitterly, Executive Director O shook his head and threw the key to Chang Sunday. Being greedy and ambitious is a young person's privilege, but being too greedy will bring you trouble one day. Executive Director O advised Chang Sun that he could be in trouble if he continued to try to sound Hyoju out, thinking Chang Sun was walking a thin line dealing with the Celestials that wanted him. As he accepted the key, Chang Sun answered Executive Director O with a nod. Go to the first floor. I've asked you, June, to wait for you there, so he'll guide you. Executive Director O explained. Thank you. Chang Sun said with a small bow. As Executive Director O pressed the button to the first floor, the elevator reached the 8th floor. As he exited the elevator, he turned to Chang Sun for the last time. Keep in mind that the Calamity Tiger isn't as generous as you think. He would rather destroy you if he can't have you. After his warning, the elevator closed and soon reached the 6th floor. Zhang Guan, who had been hesitating the entire time, broke his silence with a light sigh and passed by Chang Sunday. Well, everybody has their own plan, so I'm guessing you do too. But consider choosing the Calamity Tiger as your guardian to reach a higher rank in our clan, because you'll be able to do a lot of interesting things here. More than you think. Grinning, Zhang Guan patted Chang Sun's shoulder several times and got out of the elevator. As the elevator began to descend to the first floor, Chang Sun brushed off the shoulder that Zhang Guan patted as if he was brushing off dust and lightly snorted. Bullshit. Asterisk. For security reasons, the books in the Tier 2 library are stored in separate stone chambers according to their categories, and the visitors need different keys to enter each chamber. Song Yu Jun briefly explained as he led Chang Sun to the Fierce Tiger Library. His eyes were full of loyalty to Chang Sun, but he didn't make it obvious since too many people were watching. Chang Sun thought it was good news, because no matter how strong the brainwashing was, Yu Jun could make a rational judgment. Then which chamber can I enter with this key? Chang Sun asked, showing Yu Jun the key he received. Unlike the Tier 3 library, which just looked like an ordinary library, the Tier 2 and 1 libraries were confidential facilities. Chang Sun had no idea what they looked like. It's gonna be a problem if I can only enter a limited number of stone chambers. Chang Sun thought in discontentment. According to Yu Jun, Chang Sun couldn't go through all the books in the Tier 2 library. Since visiting the library was a rare opportunity, it would take a long time to visit the Tier 2 library multiple times. I don't know, though. Yu Jun shook his head. The only instruction he had received was to guide Chang Sunday. His eyes were full of sadness for not being able to help him more. They arrived at the Fierce Tiger Library's annex, which was a different Fierce Tiger Library building from the one that Chang Sun had previously visited. You're allowed to use the library for a total of 6 hours, so I'll see you then. Yu Jun said, finishing his explanation. After passing through all the heavy security, Chang Sun could finally enter the annex. This was what he meant by according to their categories. Chang Sun observed. In the round hall, there were a total of 10 stone doors. No, there were 9 aside from the door that Chang Sun had used to enter, and each door had a different nameplate. Fierce Tiger. Jackal Tiger. Cruel Tiger. Roaming Tiger. Mountain Tiger. Strict Tiger. 4 Tigers. Black Tiger. And Dream-Eating Beast. The celestial Calamity Tiger proudly tells you that these are the real treasures that made him who he is today. The celestial calamity tiger tempts you. He says if you become his priest, you will be able to have everything in this library. They're the advanced versions of tiger form. Chang Sun thought, realizing why the Tier 2 library existed only after he read all the nameplates. After mastering Tiger Walk, Tiger Kill, and Tiger Disaster, the three basic skills, one could transform their energy to look like a tiger using tiger form, as it meant they were able to freely use Tiger Claw and Tiger Teeth. Those two alone were enough to incapacitate most players, which was why the White Tiger clan was famous for their combat power. However, tiger form wasn't a simple skill. According to each player's personality and combat style, tiger form presented itself in different ways. It was similar to the person's hidden personality that they developed, or their shadow. Through mastering the 9 categories, one could advance their tiger form. The fierce tiger, the evil jackal tiger. If one could master a category that matched their tiger form, they would reach a higher level much more easily and transform themselves into a true force to be reckoned with. The reward on hold for finishing the quest The Tiger's Plunder will be given now. There are a total of 9 paths in front of you right now. Through each path, you can learn a method to become a tiger with a unique characteristic. Choose one of the paths. Your key will change upon your choice. However, according to the conditions set by the Calamity Tiger, you have been granted the right to open all the paths, but you must choose him as your guardian. He's pulling a stupid trick. Chang Sun lightly chuckled. He could see what Hyoju was up to. Hyoju couldn't force Chang Sun to join him, so he was trying to lure him in with gifts. If Chang Sun successfully mastered all 9 categories, they would all become Chang Sun's authorities. So with this, Hyoju was taking the plunge and practically giving almost everything away. Chang Sun assumed that Munseong was the only one who Hyoju had opened all the categories for. He's really pathetic, Chang Sun thought, because Hyoju didn't know one thing. I'm already planning on taking away everything in here, even if he didn't offer that. Chang Sun slowly pulled out the key that Executive Director O gave him. There was no reason to not take it, so he intended to get what he needed the most first. Among the 9 categories, Chang Sun chose 1. This comes from the phrase, lit. Let a tiger loose in the mountains, which means that you should take care of loose ends lest they turn into major problems in the future. 2. A metaphor for very strict rules. 3. The raw was. It's often used to refer to Baku because, in Eastern mythology, Baku feeds on people's nightmares. But also means a beast, so the current dream-eating beast isn't technically Baku. Chapter 67. Star, The Meeting, 5, you are listening at novelfull.audio. You have chosen the cruel tiger. Of course, I'm choosing this. Chang Sun faintly smiled as he walked to the 3rd door. The celestial calamity tiger tilts his head in confusion, unable to understand your decision. The celestial world encircling serpent sarcastically comments that the calamity tiger isn't smart enough to understand such a sly snake. The celestial calamity tiger frowns in humiliation. A cruel tiger lacked the ability to see compared to an ordinary tiger, so in order to survive, it had to toughen itself up, becoming as cruel as possible in the process. As a result, cruel tiger was the category most focused on enhancing the damage of tiger form among the 9. Without a care about defense, this category was all about taking the enemy's life. That was why Hyoju was dumbfounded by Chang Sun's decision. Choosing the ability to inflict great damage also meant compromising his own safety, so in some way, the category was the worst or least desirable one. However, it was the best choice for Chang Sunday. It'll match the Jigwee's Ian Fire really well. Chang Sun thought. The destructive Ian Fire and the belligerent, cruel tiger, would be a match made in heaven. It seems it'll also match the Black Mountain King's first claw, well. Click. When Chang Sun inserted the key into the stone door's lock, he could hear it click open. The celestial calamity tiger tries to persuade you that it is not too late to open the other doors too. The door to the stone chamber has opened. I want to open all the other doors with Peter's key. Chang Sun thought, but no matter how generous Hyoju was at the moment, he knew he wouldn't allow that. But he won't be able to stop me from taking things in the other chambers using another method. Cruel Tiger was just the beginning. Chang Sun could take everything in the other chambers even without Peter's key, using a method that Hyoju had never thought of. With that in mind. Creak. Chang Sun opened the chamber door wide, releasing the smell of musty antique books. You have entered the Cruel Tiger's room. Asterisk. Huh. Why isn't he coming? Did something happen to him? Ha. Ha. Shin Un Seo busily paced back and forth in the waiting room, where the attack team 2 members had guided them, as she waited for Chang Sun to come back. You're distracting me, sit down. Shin Gyu yelled at his sister. The tyrant isn't the kind of person who would get into trouble, he'll come back just fine without you worrying about him. Just stay still, because you're being obnoxious. In Gyu's eyes, Chang Sun was someone who could escape a desert on his own. Even though the media blindly used the word genius to describe him, he was truly the real deal. He's not a tyrant. Un Seo blurted out. What are you talking about? Gyu asked. He's the kind king, no, good king. Don't talk about my appa like that. Un Seo snorted. Ha. Gyu stifled a sigh and covered his face. The kind king and the good king were just nicknames that Chang Sun's fans had come up with to support him whenever he caused trouble. To defend Chang Sun, the fans made ridiculous excuses about how he only acted like a tyrant during the games, and how he was actually a real gentleman in his daily life. Gyu couldn't believe that he was hearing the cheesy nickname that Un Seo had used a million times. After being rescued by Chang Sun, it looked like his sister had become a complete fanatic, too. Compared to the noisy Un Seo, he's too quiet. Gyu thought as he glanced at Baek Jio. Who was leaning against a wall with his arms crossed. Ever since Chang Sun had followed team leader Seo Jong-gwon, Jio. Had barely said a word. Gyu asked Jio. If he was bored, but he concisely answered that he was fine and quietly closed his eyes. Gyu felt a bit awkward trying to talk to him. He's really Baek Jio. Gyu thought as he looked at Jio. Whom he could hardly recognize for a while. Although there were over 100 probationers, it was very difficult not to notice Jio. Due to his robust physique and face full of burn marks. On top of that, there was unapproachable air about him. Aside from Chang Sun, he was also the probationer that had received the highest score during the tryout, so he was quite famous among the others. However, Jio. Looked like a totally different man now. The unapproachable air had disappeared, so much so that people sometimes forgot he was in the same room as them. On top of that, his facial features were so well defined that anyone would think of him as handsome. Even the other clan members hadn't believed Jio. Was actually the Baek Jio. So they had personally interviewed him and conducted several tests. However, the results showed that it was truly Jio. When they asked about what had happened to him, Jio. Had just said that he could be cured with Chang Sun's help. In fact, Jio. Had insisted on staying beside Chang Sunday. Even now, he spoke to nobody as if he was trying to follow Chang Sun's order about staying put to the fullest extent. He looked like he was trying to remain as still as a statue until Chang Sun returned. What happened? Who's Chang Sunday? And what was he doing with Un Seo? Gyu fell deep into thought as he recalled the mysterious Chang Sunday. He didn't believe Chang Sun's story about how he just happened to find Un Seo and save her. There was definitely something that Gyu didn't know about, so no matter what the truth was, he had to find it out in order to protect his sister. The celestial world encircling serpent says he can actually hear your wheels turning, lightly clicking his tongue. Just then, a message popped up in front of Gyu. Ha! Gyu anxiously looked at the message, sent by the deity whom he had never seen in his entire life. Ordinary people tended to think that a whole new life would unfold before them if they could just be awakened as a player, but in reality, each player had different talent levels. Among those players, Gyu had the least talent of them all, so no celestials were ever interested in him. As a player that had no guardian, he sadly had never seen such a message before. The celestial world encircling serpent advises that no matter how hard you think, you will never be able to obtain the information you want in your current state. The information I want. Does he mean the information about Mr. Chang's son? Gyu wondered. The celestial world encircling serpent giggles and asks why else he would be interested in you, whose only advantage seems to be your intelligence. Gyu gaped when he realized the deity was literally reading his mind. The celestial world encircling serpent says it's not so difficult to read an open book like you. Gyu thought this mysterious deity was surely a skilled tactician, even though he talked like it was nothing. Since ancient times, snakes had been a symbol of a being that was sly, yet wise. Ever since a snake seduced Eve in the Garden of Eden and stole Gilgamesh's elixir plant. Gyu thought it was safe to assume this world encircling serpent deity was wise in a similar way. Why would the serpent deity, that enjoyed analyzing and controlling others, approach Gyu? The celestial world encircling serpent wiggles his tail in delight, happy to meet a person who seems to be skeptical like him. The celestial world encircling serpent asks how you feel about hearing out his offer. An offer to me. Gyu thought as he opened his eyes wide in shock. At the same time, he was nervous since he somehow could see why the deity had approached him. He was curious about Chang. Sunday. The celestial world encircling serpent says your guess is right, lightly laughing. The celestial world encircling serpent promises you that the offer won't cause you harm, and that he could make you his priest depending on the circumstance. Gulp. Gyu gulped. Even though he wasn't sure how great a deity this world encircling serpent was, the offer to make him a priest sounded more appealing than anything. He was about to ask what the deity's offer was, when suddenly. Gyu sensed someone from the hallway watching him, Seo, and Jio.O through the window. When he turned his head, he saw a familiar-looking man. The man also noticed Gyu and met his eyes, before he hurriedly ran to throw the waiting room door wide open. Thud. Mr. Gyu. And Ms. Seo. It was Kim Hyung-jun, the leader of the Team Adios. The other team members, who entered the room behind Hyung-jun, opened their eyes in shock as they saw not only Gyu, but also the healthy Seo, whom they thought had disappeared. Wow! You're all here. Seo was about to delightedly greet her old team members, but Gyu hurriedly stood up and interrupted her. Hold on, Seo. The celestial world encircling serpent says this will be a good chance to see your ability, flicking his tongue. Thinking Gyu was acting unusually, Seo stepped backward without refuting. Why is he suddenly acting like this? Does this have something to do with how no one was with him when I met him in the forest? Seo wondered. Ever since she was a novice, she had worked with those people. They used to say they were like a family. Although she had thought they were the sort of people who would always have her back, they hadn't been at Gyu's side when he needed them most, so he perhaps felt that she shouldn't welcome them so happily. Meanwhile, Jio.O, who had been standing quietly with his eyes closed, began to observe the situation. Gyu wasn't sure if Hyung-jun was aware of the tense air in the room, watching as Hyung-jun grabbed him by the hands. Thank God. You two are all right. What a relief. Anyone who heard Hyung Jun would think he had gone through all kinds of hardships to look for the Shin siblings, but Gyu hadn't forgotten. After days of searching for Eun Seo when she had disappeared, the team members had blatantly revealed how they were uncomfortable around him and refused to help him search for Eun Seo, claiming they were too tired. Although Hyung Jun was supposed to stop the team members from acting that way, he secretly encouraged them. The main reason Gyu had left the team in the middle of the night was that he didn't want to deal with those pressures anymore. Therefore, Gyu responded bluntly, "We were lucky." He didn't want to bother arguing with Hyung Jun or patching things up with him. In the end, the room fell into an awkward silence. Too awkward to interact with the cold Gyu and the silent Eun Seo, the other team members nervously looked elsewhere. It was difficult for Hyung Jun to continue the conversation, but he kept trying as he glanced at Eun Seo. Even though Hyung Jun had ultimately let Gyu go, he had developed a relationship with Eun Seo for a very long time, so he didn't want to give up on her so easily. "Anyways, where have you been? Can you move?" A man suddenly interrupted Hyung Jun from behind. Due to the abrupt dungeon closing, the training had come to an early end, but along with Lim Ju Han, Hyung Jun was considered one of the rising stars among the probationers. On top of that, he was the son of the White Tiger Clan's executive, so when he had arrived at the White Tiger Clan's head office, he felt more comfortable than in the training institute, as the head office was practically his front yard. How could someone talk to him like that in his own front yard? When he annoyedly turned to see who had spoken, he could see Chang Sun walking in his direction. Li Chang Sun. I heard the executives summoned him to question him about the cleared dungeon, but why is he here? Unable to approach Chang Sun, the team members furtively stepped back and made way for him. This ignited Hyung Jun's inferiority complex that had been formed through constantly being overshadowed by Chang Sun, all the way from the tryouts to the training institute. They didn't act like that when they were with me. Hyung Jun thought as he gritted his teeth. The team members that had worked with him for a long time weren't uncomfortable around Chang Sunday. They looked at him with envy and awe even though they had never had a proper conversation with him. Hyung Jun couldn't control his inferiority complex, and it soon became stronger, finally boiling over when he saw Eun Seo, who had been watching him with disgusted eyes, casually walk over to Chang Sunday. Snap! At that moment, Hyung Jun felt himself snap. He grabbed Eun Seo's wrist. "What are you doing?" Eun Seo irritatedly looked at him. Hyung Jun smirked back at her. "I can't believe you're acting like this when you played so hard to get before. Did you disappear because you were busy with a man?" "What?" Eun Seo couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Why? Do you have something to say? Try." Hyung Jun was about to continue, but he hurriedly turned his head when he sensed someone silently watching him. It was Chang Sun. Chapter 68. The Meeting, 6, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Shall I just stab him? Shin Eun Seo momentarily thought. She hadn't yet mastered the new power she had suddenly been given, but she knew that she was capable enough to beat the life out of Kim Hyung Jun, just like she had done with Lim Ju Han. Ultimately she decided against it, as there were too many people watching. Things would become too complicated if the clan decided to reprimand her for causing trouble, and there was a chance it would be a nuisance to Chang Sun, who had saved her. Above all, Eun Seo knew Hyung Jun was the clan director's son because he had furtively let her know when they were in the training institute. At the time, she hadn't been sure why he had mentioned it, but now it seemed that he had thought it would draw her interest. To be honest, Eun Seo had never been interested in Hyung Jun in the first place, despite the fact they were on the same team. Although he wasn't actually capable enough, he overconfidently bluffed, which made him so unattractive to her. She was aware of how he looked at her from time to time. However, she didn't care because business was business, and the Team Adios was a good place to build her career. She would have thought differently if Hyung Jun had blatantly attempted to seduce or harass her, but he hadn't gone that far at the time. She had believed that as long as she drew a clear line, it would be okay. Now though, it seemed like she had misjudged how terrible of a man Hyung Jun truly was. Regardless, she didn't want to cause a scene. She planned on ending with a simple warning, until Chang Sun stepped in. Oppa. Seo thought in shock when she saw Chang Sun silently watching Hyung Jun with a menacing gaze. The air in the room was so suffocating that it was difficult for Seo, or any of the other team members for that matter, to speak. Hyung Jun somehow mustered up the courage to challenge Chang Sun, despite the fact that couldn't bring himself to look him in the eye. What? What are you going to do if you stare, ugh? Chang Sun interrupted Hyung Jun, grabbing his collar and holding him in the air without saying anything. Writhing in midair, Hyung Jun shoved Chang Sun's arms several times, but it didn't budge one bit. It was as if Chang Sun's arm was made of solid stone. Be careful. Walking on eggshells, Hyung Jun's team members anxiously spoke up, but no one dared try to stop Chang Sunday. The air around him had become much more intimidating than before, making them feel like they would end up like Hyung Jun if they got on Chang Sun's bad side. Don't kill me. Hyung Jun wheezed as his face turned pale from the lack of air. Using his magic, he tried to push Chang Sun's arm away by activating a skill. Although the council prohibited using a skill directly on another person, Hyung Jun was desperate. It really felt like Chang Sun might kill him if he did nothing. The skill activation has been cancelled. The skill activation has been cancelled. The problem was, for an unknown reason, Hyung Jun couldn't activate his skill, so he had no means to counterattack. He had once thought that he could take out Chang Sun anytime he wanted, but his groundless confidence was long gone now. On top of that, there was something more scary than Chang Sun's firm grip around his neck. His eyes. Hyung Jun thought in fear. They were hidden behind Chang Sun's long fringes, but his gaze sent shivers down Hyung Jun's spine. Chang Sun's left eye was especially menacing, like a growling tiger that was about to eat Hyung Jun. Yes, his eyes were like that of a tiger. Hyung Jun had a thought that the White Tiger Clan's instructors or even the attack team leaders were not as scary as Chang Sun. The instructors and the attack team leaders had made Hyung Jun feel overwhelmed, but they didn't make him. However, he felt like Chang Sun was going to kill him any second. No, Chang Sun would easily shred him to pieces, leaving no trace that Hyung Jun even existed. The fear of death overwhelmed his body, suffocating him even more. His mind turned blank as the tiger named Chang Sun opened his mouth and lightly bit his head. Ugh, arg. The cruel tiger's one that eye holds you. It had only been a few hours after Chang Sun had acquired the cruel tiger, the advanced tiger form, from the stone chamber that he had chosen, but he already had the proper form of a veteran. Thus, it was only natural for Hyung Jun to fail in withstanding Chang Sun's tiger kill. Cruel tiger, a tiger that only held two attributes, murderous intent and viciousness. With this, one was able to make an opponent feel the fear of death with just one look. Type. Trait. Effect. Fills user with murderous desire. Triggers fear. Since only an attack team leader or an executive was allowed to have this skill, there was no way Hyung Jun could resist. You have fallen into the feared state. You have fallen into the panic state. You have fallen into the confused state. Warning. You have fallen into the extreme panic state, so there is a possibility of your ego collapsing. You are advised to quickly exit your current location. Arg. As messages continuously popped up faster than Hyung Jun could read them, he fainted, foam dripping from his mouth. Is he? The smell, a wet spot quickly formed on the crotch of Hyang-Jun's pants, leaking down until his urine created a puddle on the waiting room floor. Only then did Chang-sun finally let go of Hyang-Jun's collar. With a splash, Hyang-Jun pathetically fell into the yellow puddle. "Let's go," said Chang-sun, making Seo, who had been blankly watching everything, snap out of it. She looked at Chang-sun with rosy cheeks and sparkling eyes and answered, "Okay, Appa." Without even glancing at the fainted Hyang-Jun, Chang-sun exited the waiting room as if spending one more second there was a waste of time, and Seo followed closely behind him. Meanwhile, Shin Gyu looked at the fainted Hyang-Jun for a moment before spitting on him and walking off. Baek Jio-ul was the last one to exit the room, but he didn't pay much attention to Hyang-Jun. Hyang-Jun's team members, now left alone in the waiting room, busily tried to figure out their next move. But, when the stench of urine reached them, they quickly exited as though nothing had happened. They had instinctively realized that there was no need to get on the wrong side of Chang-sun's group by continuing to interact with Hyang-Jun. So, in the end, Hyang-Jun was left alone in the waiting room for a long time. ******* In the first floor lobby, many people turned their heads to see Chang-sun, who had set the clan on fire, walking across the room with his group. Humming with delight, Seo took the lead as she hopped around. Suddenly, she turned to Chang-sun and asked, "Appa, what do you want to eat?" "What do I want to eat?" Chang-sun repeated. "Yeah, let's have a group dinner since the training is over, please," said Seo, looking at Chang-sun with a twinkle in her eye. Jio-ul, who had been silently standing by Chang-sun, opened his eyes wide when he heard the words, "group dinner," and glanced expectantly at Chang-sun. Gyu stood at the rear, and hesitantly looked at Chang-sun's back as if he was guilty of something. However, Chang-sun answered, "Not today." "Ha! But..." Seo was about to insist. "There are too many people watching, so let's have a group dinner later." "I don't like noisy places." Chang-sun interrupted and explained. Seo, Gyu, and Jio-ul tilted their heads in confusion. When Chang-sun pulled out sunglasses, the three weren't even sure how he had gotten them. From his inner pocket, they grew even more confused, but after they crossed the lobby and passed the main entrance's revolving door, the three belatedly understood. Click, click, click. A swarm of reporters who had all been waiting for this moment bombarded them, taking photos of Chang-sun and blinding the group with their camera flashes. "Mr. Lee Chang-sun, can you comment on how you feel about clearing the dungeon for the first time in the history of the White Tiger Clan? No, in the history of Korea." The White Tiger Clan announced that they weren't planning on filing a claim for compensation regarding the current incident, rather they are going to assign you to more missions. Have you by any chance talked with the clan about this? With the occurrence of many events like your SSS+++ magic grade, media outlets around the world are talking about you, Mr. Lee Chang-sun. Can you comment about? As far as I'm aware, you've received several offers from foreign clans. Is there a reason why you've chosen the White Tiger Clan? Can you tell me about your life after you've retired? Mr. Lee Chang-sun. Mr. Lee Chang-sun, a comment. Can you give me a comment? So many people threw themselves at Chang-sun with questions. If the bodyguards hadn't formed a blockade in advance to prevent a commotion, they would have surely glued themselves to Chang-sun. Jio-ul gaped hard, and Gyu was rendered speechless. They had never seen such a sight. Seo smacked her forehead as she recalled, "Oh, yeah. This is my Appa's daily life." With his splendid gaming skill and arrogant way of speaking, Chang-sun often became a trending topic whenever he did interviews. As a former actress' son, he had looked especially attractive under the spotlight, and now he had cleared the dungeon that had remained uncleared for a long time. It was like pouring oil on a fire that was already spreading wild. Behind the reporters, many young fans were cheering and waving banners with all kinds of messages on them. The banners were filled with cheesy, embarrassing lines. Arg! Why did those crazy guys come here? Eun Seo thought as she hurriedly covered her face. Among those fans, there were members of the fan club that Eun Seo had joined. Since she had met up with those people as the fan club manager, they would become frantic and call her non-stop if they saw her in the same picture as Chang Sunday. In the midst of all this chaos, Chang Sun stayed nonchalant, as he was used to it. Some reporters even put their microphones right up against his mouth, but he just ignored them. Instead, he turned his head and waited for something. A limousine happened to break through the crowd and arrived in front of Chang Sunday. When the bodyguard opened the limo door, Chang Sun gestured at the group with his chin. Get in. Due to the sudden arrival of the limousine, Jio.ul, Eun Seo, and GM.yu were hesitant, but they quickly got in the car after Chang Sun stepped in. After the bodyguard closed the door, the limousine departed right away. The reporters rushed forward to at least take one more picture of Chang Sun, but the limousine swiftly exited the White Tiger clan's head office. After getting through the crowd, Eun Seo furtively looked out the window to figure out whether or not the fan club members had seen her. On the other hand, Gyu dumbfoundedly asked, What's this limousine, my car? Executive Director O gave it to me along with a chauffeur. Chang Sun calmly explained. Gyu had heard that the White Tiger clan had offered a shockingly good compensation package, but he had never expected the clan to provide a car, no, a limousine to a mere rookie. Gyu gawked at Chang Sun as looking at a being from another world. Chapter 69. Star, The Meeting, 7, you are listening at novelfull.audio. And what did you want to talk to me about? Chang Sun suddenly asked the half-conscious Gyu, bringing him back to reality. Pardon. Gyu spoke with a goofy voice because he still couldn't understand what Chang Sun said. Feeling icky, Eun Seo happened to look away from the window and watched her pathetic twin brother. Although Gyu was annoyed by his sister for a moment, he soon let out a long sigh when Chang Sun calmly continued, when we were in the lobby, you looked like you had something to say to me. Am I wrong? Chang Sun was sitting across Gyu, but he really couldn't tell what was going on inside Chang Sun's head. You noticed it? Gyu asked. You were clearly anxious, it would be more strange if I didn't notice. Chang Sun shrugged. Gyu sighed again, because although Chang Sun spoke vaguely, he was sure that Chang Sun knew what he was going to say on some level. The Chang Sun Gyu had observed until now was capable enough, so he cut to the chase. Do you happen to know the divine name, World Encircling Serpent? The celestial, World Encircling Serpent is shocked to suddenly hear his name. The celestial, World Encircling Serpent irritatedly asks why you have such loose lips, pounding on the ground with his tail. Even now, Gyu was torn as he looked at Rumungandra's protesting messages. Should he tell Chang Sun that it was nothing? Then Chang Sun might doubt him, but the deity's offer would still stand. Gyu's level was already over 20, but he still didn't have a guardian. Since this was a serious disadvantage for a player, he was having a severe inner conflict about whether or not to accept the World Encircling Serpent's offer to become his guardian. He knew that he had only managed to join the White Tiger clan with Eun Seo's help, making Gyu even more torn. At this rate, he would only be a burden on Eun Seo, unable to protect or help her. Even today, he hadn't done anything when Kim Hyung Jun had been rude to Eun Seo. It had all been Chang Sunday. The same had happened with Lim Ju Han because Gyu was too weak. Still, he calmed down and decided that he was going to tell Chang Sun, since he had already planned on it. Even though it was sad to lose a potential guardian, Gyu didn't want to lie to his sister's savior. Yeah, I know him because he's one of the deities that are interested in me. Chang Sun nodded. After hearing the expected answer, GM Gyu cleared his throat and continued, that same deity asked me to observe every detail about you and report what I noticed in secret. The celestial world encircling serpent grumbles that his whole plan is ruined. When GM Gyu saw the deity's message, his nervousness subsided a little. Report. Chang Sun repeated. Yes, he also asked me to report in detail if I noticed your secret. GM Gyu trailed off. Hey! Why did you wait this long to tell such big news? Seo, who had been anxiously listening to the conversation, pinched GM Gyu's waist hard. Arg! It hurts. Why does it hurt so much? GM Gyu shrieked. Of course, it should hurt. You should have told me that right away. Seo fiercely yelled. It hasn't been long since I received the message. That's why I'm telling you right now. GM Gyu yelled back. Still, you should have told me as soon as you received it. Seo pinched and twisted GM Gyu's belly tight, as if she was never going to let it go. Her grip had started off strong, but she grabbed him now with even more power, putting GM Gyu through hell. Even though Seo continued to give GM Gyu her death glare, both the Shin siblings grew timid and silent when they looked at Chang Sun, worrying that he might be angry at the news. That's a weird request. Chang Sun lightly snorted and crossed his legs, as if J.Ramungander's offer was not such a big deal. GM Gyu hesitantly asked, Are you not angry? Angry? Why should I be angry? Chang Sun tilted his head. Well, I was actually torn. GM Gyu blankly opened and closed his mouth, looking for the right words to say. So, did you figure out anything? Chang Sun spoke. No. GM Gyu waved both his hands fiercely in denial. Chang Sun had a cold expression on his face, but he let out a faint smile and chuckled, Then, there's no problem. Why would you apologize when you've done nothing wrong? For a moment, GM Gyu looked dumbfounded because he had never expected Chang Sun to react like this. In fact, he was prepared for Chang Sun to declare him as his enemy, and perhaps quit the White Tiger clan, as anyone would have been angry to find out that someone they knew had received such a request. It didn't matter what they ended up finding out, the fact that they had received such a request alone was unpleasant. Yet, Chang Sun spoke like it didn't affect him one bit. If anything, he lessened the burden on GM Gyu's mind. That was when GM Gyu knew. His caliber, it's too high. Chang Sun's caliber was so different from that of ordinary people that to GM Gyu, he seemed like a god amongst men. The doubts and questions GM Gyu had about Chang Sun disappeared like melting snow, leaving only the light that seemed to radiate from his very being. The celestial world encircling serpent coils himself and buries his head out of boredom. Anyhow, what did the deity offer you in return? Chang Sun asked. The celestial world encircling serpent furtively raises his head. GM Gyu wasn't sure why he was still seeing the deity's messages when he should have been done with GM Gyu, but he stopped paying attention to the messages and quickly answered, he said he'll teach me black magic spells. Black magic spells. Chang Sun opened his eyes wide in surprise. Wondering if he had said something wrong, GM Gyu continued more cautiously, Yes, he said that the magic spells would suit me more than anything, report. Chang Sun immediately instructed. Pardon. GM Gyu flinched. He said to observe and report about me, right? Do it. Chang Sun demanded once more. What? GM Gyu gaped. The celestial world encircling serpent stands up and blinks, failing to understand what is going on. GM Gyu didn't understand either, so he just stood there blinking too. The black magic spells used by world encircling serpent are among the very best magic spells. They are called Ouroboros structural formula. It's very difficult to begin and continue learning these spells, so, Ouroboros structural formula, users tend to be quite arrogant. If he offered to teach you these spells despite all this, the world-encircling serpent must think highly of your talent. Gyu opened his eyes wide in shock. No, should I say he thought highly of your intelligence if he made such an offer? Either way, it seems like he saw something in you. Sun assumed. The celestial world-encircling serpent gapes, astonished that Sun somehow figured him out. This message popped up, indicating that even the deity was surprised, but Gyu didn't even notice, busy calming himself down after hearing what Sun had said. I have a talent. Gyu thought, unable to control himself from trembling. Sun himself had said Gyu had a talent, a word that Gyu never thought would be attributed to him. The celestial world-encircling serpent tells you to not be too happy, grumbling. The celestial world-encircling serpent says that he could cover a mountain with the followers and scholars that want to learn from him. Although the deity warned Gyu, the fact that the magic spells were hard didn't matter to him. What mattered to him now was that he had received an opportunity. So, do as you've been asked. Sun repeated, confirming to Gyu that he wasn't dreaming. With that, Gyu gave Sun a determined nod. Dropping off the Shin sibling in Pangeo, Sun promised to have a group dinner after things quieted down, before the limousine drove off discreetly. The twins stood there quietly, until the limousine was so far away that they couldn't see it anymore. Gyu broke the silence. Seo, what? Seo blankly asked. Starting from today, I'm his fan. Gyu declared. Are you trying to teach a fish to swim? Seo pompously crossed her arms. Ask me anything you want to know about my appa, and I'll tell you everything. Mwahaha. A fan was bound to be happy when somebody else recognized their beloved star's charm. Seo thought Gyu had finally recognized Sun's charm and reveled in the moment. What the hell are you saying? I'm not a crazy Seising like you. Gyu sarcastically remarked, looking at Seo with a disgusted face. Whack. Arg. My leg. My leg. Gyu rolled around the ground after suddenly getting kicked in his shin by Seo. Snorting, Seo stepped over her pathetic twin brother and headed inside her home. The celestial world-encircling serpent asks how you know such information. I think I'll keep it a secret, just like you tried to keep a secret from me. Sun shrugged. The celestial world-encircling serpent angrily pounds the ground with his tail, saying you are indeed one sly snake. Sun didn't mind J.Rumungandra's constant protesting messages, as he was deep in thought. I didn't think I would hear about Urobora's structural formula. He thought. Among the absolute evil-type deities, J.Rumungandra was one of the greatest scholars, alongside being a skilled black wizard. Therefore the Uroboros Mountain Magic School, the group that had J.Rumungandra as its guardian, was considered the best in multiple planes, including heaven. Before Sun had become the divine Twilight, he had also taken a deep interest in the group. In this school, the group members' research mainly focused on the circle of life and death, so they naturally came out with all kinds of bizarre and extraordinary results that ordinary people couldn't even begin to fathom. I didn't learn it at the time because I was busy learning about runes. Sun recalled. On the basis of difficulty, Urobora's structural formula was just as difficult as runes for new learners, but unlike the forgotten runes, Urobora's structural formula was becoming more and more popular. Anyways, Gyu was now able to learn such magic spells. Although Sun knew that the reason why Gyu could learn those spells was him, he thought it was for the better since Gyu would gain power in no time under J.Rumungandra's care. If Sun could have Gyu on his side, there was no harm in that. It'll be good if he can teach me how to be more versatile with my magic spells. Sun thought. Jiao.O, who was now sitting across from Chang Sun, quietly looked at him. Chang Sun could sense that Jiao.O felt nervous. Chang Sun had a guess as to why Jiao.O felt that way, and he smiled bitterly. Jiao.O was nervous because Chang Sun was dropping him off in front of his home, meaning he would see how and where Jiao.O lived. You said you live in Noryangjan, right? Chang Sun asked. Yes, that's right, sir. Jiao.O nodded. You're lying, aren't you? Chang Sun tilted his head. Be calm, no. I'm not lying. It's not big, but I'm staying at a Gashawan, tell me the truth while I'm being nice. Chang Sun faintly smiled. Jiao.O stayed silent. When we get to Noryangjan, I'm going to follow you to your Gashawan, and if I don't see the room you told me about, I'll smack you in the back of your head. Chang Sun spoke in an arrogant tone, crossing his arms. As Chang Sun pressed him further, the big Jiao.O's shoulder drooped down more and more. Although he looked cold and distant in front of others like the Shin siblings, he somehow seemed vulnerable now alone in front of Chang Sunday. You don't have a home, do you? Chang Sun asked. No, sir, I don't have a home. Jiao.O looked at his feet. Where did you stay before? Chang Sun asked, stroking his chin. Jiao.O fidgeted with his fingers. I used the house deposit to get my spear. TSK. Chang Sun lightly clicked his tongue because he had already guessed that was the situation on some level after finding out about Jiao.O's story. Since Jiao.O had been discriminated against and hated for his entire life, he had even failed to receive mandatory education. It was no surprise to hear that Jiao.O didn't have a proper home. The studios he had stayed in would have probably also been a mess, and Chang Sun wasn't sure if those studios even had hot water. Nevertheless, Jiao.O wandered the dungeon with his long spear. Considering how players had to spend most of their money on weapons to work as a player, Jiao.O would have spent all of what little money he had to get his. It seems he luckily didn't get ripped off while getting the weapon, but that's it. That's the problem. Chang Sun thought bitterly. On the other hand, Chang Sun could understand why Jiao.O had gambled and spent all his money on getting the weapon. He must have thought that capturing a Jigui was the only way to cure him of his curse, so it would be more strange if he hadn't done so. What would have happened if he had failed to meet Chang Sun and kill the Jiguis? Chang Sun didn't want to imagine it. Xerxes, you idiot. Do you even know how your son is doing? Chang Sun called for his old colleague in his thoughts and lightly sighed. God only knew where Xerxes was now. Chang Sun would feel like a piece of trash if he didn't help his friend's son in a time of need. I have to help him learn what it's like to be a half-spirit. Chang Sun thought. This is for the better, said Chang Sun finally, nodding his head. Pardon. Jiao.O, who had been drooping his shoulders and walking on eggshells around Chang Sun an awful lot for such a large man, asked back. Wondering what Chang Sun meant, Jiao.O opened his eyes wide like a golden retriever. Stay in my home for the time being. Chang Sun instructed. Jiao.O gaped. 1. A region in Korea. 2. Korean term for a stalker fan. 3. A region in Korea. 4. This is a type of accommodation that can be found in Korea. People studying for exams usually stay in this kind of accommodation to focus only on studying. Since the accommodation is cheap, people who aren't studying for exams often stay here too. Chapter 70. Star, The Shadow, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I'm home, Chang Sun said as he entered through the front door. Oh, my. You came home already. I thought you said the training would take more than 3 months. Chang Sun's mother, Soyu.ha, emerged and greeted him in shock. Judging from her apron and the spatula in her hand, she must have been cooking dinner. The training ended earlier than I expected, so I came back early, Chang-sun explained. I would have prepared more dishes if I knew you were coming, Yu-Ha said regretfully. It's okay. I don't mind waiting. Otherwise, we can order, Chang-sun reassured her. Nonsense. You've come back home after a long time, so you should eat a home-cooked meal. Yu-Ha shook her head. Then, can I ask you a favor? Chang-sun asked. A favor? Yu-Ha's eyes widened, she was unable to understand Chang-Sunday. As of late, he had been eating a lot. Could it mean he wanted to eat more home-cooked meals, as he had come back home after a long time? Instead of answering her, Chang-sun looked outside and called out, "What are you doing over there? Come in." Wondering who was outside, Yu-Ha followed Chang-sun's gaze. She was shocked to see a large, tall man outside, who seemed hesitant to enter. He's... Yu-Ha trailed off. He's my friend, and his name is Baek Jio. Come in, Chang-sun said, gesturing at Jio. Excuse me, Jio said, shyly entering with a face so red he looked as if he were about to explode any second. He stared at the floor, unable to meet Yu-Ha's gaze. Thinking he was very innocent for his age, Yu-Ha smiled brightly and said, "You're Chang-sun's friend, so don't just stand there. Come inside." Thank you, Jio said in a barely audible voice and nodded, but he was still shy. Although he was a head taller, he quietly hid behind Chang-Sunday. Looking at Jio, Yu-Ha reflexively chuckled, saying, "There's no need for you to be nervous. Just make yourself at home." As he started talking to the gentle Yu-Ha, Jio slowly relaxed and began to enter, finally seeing the inside of Chang-sun's home little by little, he was left very surprised. He gaped slightly, thinking, this kind of home really exists. Perhaps because he had always lived in old studios underground, Jio was amazed by everything in the house. In the studios he had lived in, he had always been worried about bumping into the ceiling, but he did not need to worry about that here because the ceiling was so high. There were no black water stains or mold on the clean walls. The floor was made from bright marble of the sort he had only seen on TV, leaving him unsure whether it was really all right for him to set his feet on the floor. When he wore the indoor slippers given to him by Yu-Ha, they were shockingly fluffy. However, what surprised him even more was the living room, after he crossed the foyer. It's so big. Jio thought in shock, unable to believe such a large house existed. When he lay down in his old studios, his head and toes had touched opposite walls at the same time, and he had been able to get to the other end by rolling once. In contrast, he could roll several times in this living room, and he would never be able to reach opposite walls simultaneously while lying down. I can even see the Hangang River. Jio thought, looking through the window with sparkling eyes. Through the wide balcony window, he could see the Hangang River immediately. As it was sunset, the river was full of various lights, creating a night scene that made Jio marvel. Mr. Chang-sun lives in such a place. Jio looked at Chang-sun, who behaved as if all he had were nothing unusual, feeling even more impressed by him. He had already been full of awe and respect for Chang-sun, but those emotions had only grown. Even before he became a player, Jio had known that Chang-sun was famous, but after seeing the real Chang-sun with his own eyes, Jio was even more amazed by him and was not even jealous. He might have been if he could actually compare his life with Chang-sun's, but he was unable to. Thus, he could never be jealous of Chang-sunday. That's. Jio thought, turning to the large television that covered an entire wall of the living room. It was broadcasting about Chang-sunday. On the news, the reporter was delivering the latest story next to a picture of Chang-sun and several familiar people. Along with the Shin siblings, Jio, who had been staying right next to Chang-sun the entire time, was in the picture. It's a bit embarrassing, Gio thought. Oh. Hey. Who are you? A woman who had been lying down and chewing on dried squid screamed after belatedly noticing Chang, Sun and Gio. She was Li Hei, Xian, Chang.Sun's sister. Why are you? Seeing no problem with entering his own home, Chang, Sun looked emotionlessly at Xian and pointed at the TV with his chin, as if to ask why she was watching the news. Xian finally realized her mistake and hurriedly turned off the TV with the remote control, exclaiming, changing channels. Yeah. I've been changing channels and coincidentally put on the news. I didn't say anything, Chang, Sun replied, not sure what Xian had expected him to say. Xian's face reddened and she exclaimed, ugh. You're annoying. Stomp. Stomp. She stomped irritatedly into her room. Why are you suddenly going into your room? It's almost dinner time. Called out, following Xian. However, Xian quickly slammed the door and yelled, I'm not going to eat dinner. Thud. My, where did she get her temper? Sighed, shaking her head, and smiled bitterly as she looked at Chang.Sunday. As you already know, your sister is really bad at expressing her emotions. She may grumble a lot, but she's been worrying so much about you. Every day, she reads news that talks about you, and a couple of days ago, she watched your tryout video on YouTube. Mom. Don't be absurd. I hate him. Xian opened her bedroom door and shrieked with an even redder face than before. Gaped, exclaiming, Xian. You're his big sister, so you shouldn't say such a mean thing to your brother, who came back home after such a long time. Forget it. I'm really not going to eat. Xian retorted, stomping her feet. Do you really think you can win an argument by not eating? Asked. I don't know. I don't know. Xian yelled, shaking her head. After rebuking her daughter, eventually suggested to Chang, Sun and Gio. Why don't you two get freshened up first? Chang, Sun took Gio. Into his room. Whoa! Gio. Exclaimed loudly, no longer able to hold in his sense of wonder. Sir, so this is your room, Chang, Sun said, cutting him off. Pardon? Gio. Asked, tilting his head. Call me Chang, Sun repeated. So, this is your room, Gio. Replied, feeling somewhat shy as he called Chang, Sun, Hyung. He was very unfamiliar with the term, as he had never been close to anyone, but still, he was having a great deal of fun. Although he had been lonely his entire life, he felt that he now had a friend who would always have his back, like a wall. I think Xerxes would nag about making things complicated, Chang, Sun thought with a chuckle, looking at Gio. He was also reluctant to be called Hyung by his old colleague Sun, but considering his physical age in this world, it made sense for him to be called this way. Yeah, this is my room, Chang, Sun replied with a nod. This is amazing. It's bigger than my house, Gio. Murmured, continuing to admire the large room as he looked around. On the walls, there were various posters of Chang, Sun as a professional gamer. Countless trophies were in his bookcase, every one of them saying, first place, first place, first place. From looking at them, Gio. Could tell how great a professional gamer Chang Sun had been. However, those posters and trophies were not what stole Gio.'s attention. On top of Chang.Sun's desk, there was a desktop computer that looked more expensive than the ones Gio.ol had seen while wandering from one PC bang to another, and 3 top-of-the-line monitors beside it. Wow, Gio.ol murmured, looking around to see more of the room. There were various game consoles such as a PS5, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox Series X, and several game cases stacked in a small bookcase. Is it your first time seeing these? Chang Sun asked. Yeah, I couldn't afford these. Wow, you even have third life rancor. It must have been difficult to get this, and it's even a limited edition. Jio.ol trailed off, dumbfounded. With sparkling eyes, he looked at the classic game, for which people had to pay several times more than the original price, like a child who had found an interesting toy. Chang Sun chuckled lightly because he had not thought the stern Jio.ol would be interested in such things. In the end, he handed Jio.ol a game controller and said, "Try it." Can I? Jio.ol asked, scratching his head. Why not? Chang Sun replied, putting the game controller in Jio.ol's hands. After his regression, Chang Sun had never played games, so he thought it would be better to watch Jio.ol play. Besides, he had even forgotten how to play games, and they were not even fun anymore. However, it would be different for Jio.ol. Just as expected, Jio.ol nervously received the game controller with shining eyes. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, even the bathroom is really big, and I can use hot water as much as I want, Jio.ol thought as he got out of the bathroom with rosy cheeks, drying his hair. The boilers had always broken down in his old studios, usually forcing him to shower with cold water. On top of that, he had not been able to own shampoo, conditioner, or body wash, which meant he had needed to wash himself and his clothes with one bar of soap. Thus, when he actually got to use all of those things, he felt as if he were living in a brand new world. Chang Sun Hyung truly lives in a different world, Jio.ol thought, realizing how hard his life had been once again. However, what surprised him the most was when he sat at the dining table. It's not much, but help yourself, Yu.Ha said as she sat down. There are so many. Jio.ol exclaimed, gaping as he saw the table full of banchan. How many kinds of banchan were on the table? 10. No, there were more than 11. Along with banchan made from meat, seafood, and vegetables, there was a boiling pot of doenjang.jjigae in the center of the table. On top of each multi-grain rice bowl, there was even a fried egg. It was truly a feast for Jio.ol, whose everyday meal was rice and kimchi, or sometimes jjajuli if he was lucky. I'm not sure if you'll like them. How is it? Yu.Ha asked. They're so good. Jio.ol exclaimed from the bottom of his heart. The many kinds of banchan also tasted good. He felt as if the freshly cooked rice were melting in his mouth, and Yu.Ha had perfectly seasoned and grilled an entire mackerel. Additionally, the seasoned vegetable dish was so good that Jio.ol's jaw dropped. Oh my, I'm so glad to hear that. To be honest, I put in a lot of effort for the first time in a while, Yu.Ha said with a smile. I think you could open up a restaurant, because I've never tasted anything like your cooking, Jio.ol said while covering his food-filled mouth. You talk so sweetly. I hope some youngest son learn from you, Yu.Ha said jokingly, making Jio.ol glance at Chang Sun, who was sitting beside him. Without saying anything, Chang Sun ate like a monk consuming tasteless temple food. They're good, Chang Sun concisely answered after sensing Yu.Ha and Jio.ol looking at him, but his monotonous tone made his answer sound insincere. Yu.Ha pouted with discontent, saying, look at him. That's why I don't want to cook delicious meals for him. Was your name Jio.ol? Ha. Yeah, I'm Jio.ol. Jio.ol replied with a nod. Do you want to be my youngest son? I think you'll be a better youngest son than him, Yu.Ha suddenly asked. Well. Jio.ol trailed off hesitantly, unsure what to answer, and studied Chang.sun's face to see whether he was angry. Yu.Ha burst into laughter and said, you don't have to take it seriously. I was just joking. Jio.ol blankly looked at Yu.Ha for a while, feeling warm, but he was unsure why. He just felt that way, suddenly experiencing a sense of déjà vu. Yu.Ha's laughter somehow set butterflies in his stomach, reminding him of a forgotten memory. It seemed he had heard similar laughter during the childhood he no longer remembered. The only thing he could remember from that time was a faint afterimage, but that image was warm, just like now. My beautiful, very beautiful baby, ah, Gio.O thought, vaguely realizing whose laughter it was. Mom. It's Mom's laughter. I also had a loving mom, even though I don't remember her. After realizing that, Gio.O had to lower his head, bullying the innocent rice bowl with his spoon during the entire meal in order to not choke up and cry. Without saying anything, Chung-sun looked at Gio.O, who was sitting by his side. 1. A Korean dish that is thicker than jjigae but has more soup than stir-fried dishes.